Ready to tackle that building project? Start right. Start here at H&L Rapid True Value for building supplies. The time by H&L Rapid True Value is
Nationwide time, 5 o'clock.
Learn about smart betting strategies with AnyBet. Bet wisely, enjoy responsibly, and maximize your success. The temperature by AnyBet is...
It's 31 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 29 in Montego Bay.
News at 5 teasers are brought to you by Advanced Scales and Equipment. Service is our total commitment.
From the Nationwide News Network, comprehensive, incisive, tough. This is Nationwide at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Robianne Williams.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
In Nationwide News at this hour, U.S. President Donald Trump announces a 10% tariff on Jamaican exports to the American market.
A minimum baseline tariff of 10%, and that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating.
And Trump says his sweeping new tariffs are a declaration of America's economic independence.
This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back. We're going to come back very strongly.
Indicom says police fatal shootings have increased year over year since 2020 to reach their highest point in nearly a decade.
SHIP is 96% complete.
Munir Zaka, remembered as the classic method actor.
In news from the rest of the world, the health ministry is probing malaria outbreak in Trinidad and Tobago.
Federal judge permanently dismisses criminal case against New York's mayor.
And in headline sports, Jamaica Scorpions locked in tight battle against Trinidad and Tobago's Red Force in 6th round of regional cricket encounter.
And later in our broadcast, in our cover story at 5:35, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced sweeping new tariffs to be imposed on countries across the globe. This includes 10% tariff on Jamaican exports to the American market. Executive Director at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, Dr. Damian King, and social and political commentator Dr. Karen Dunkley will join us for reactions.
And at 6, the team will be at UWI Regional Headquarters for the Grace Kennedy Foundation 35th Annual Public Lecture. The lecture will focus on the impact of childhood trauma on social, cognitive, and emotional development, as well as its link to long-term physical and behavioral health in adulthood, featuring Professor Dr. Wendell Abel.
All these and more as we take you home on air on your mobile, Nationwide 90 FM, nationwideradiojm.com, and on the Nationwide app available on the Google Play Store and the App Store. This Wednesday afternoon, it's Wednesday, April 2, 2025.
News at 5 teasers were brought to you by Advanced Scales and Equipment. Service is our total commitment.
If it's news, it's got to be Nationwide 90 FM.
Now the details. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 10% tariff on Jamaican exports to the American market. President Trump announced the new tariffs in a media conference at the White House on Wednesday.
We will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%, and that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made. And it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept.
U.S. President Donald Trump. According to Trump, the tariff is in retaliation for the 10% tariff now charged by Jamaica on U.S. imports. The tariff means American consumers are likely to see an increase in the price of Jamaican goods sold on the U.S. market. St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Kitts, and Antigua are among the Caribbean countries that will also see a 10% tariff applied to their exports. Nearly 60 countries across the world have been hit with tariffs ranging from 10% to as high as 49%. China, countries in the European Union, Taiwan, and Vietnam are among the hardest hit. It's one of the most sweeping impositions of tariffs in U.S. history. Trump says the tariffs are aimed at protecting American markets from unfair global trade practices. He's projecting a resurgence in American manufacturing as a result of the sweeping tariffs. Economists have warned that the tariffs could spark a global trade war and significant inflation.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says it's Liberation Day in America as he announced his sweeping new tariffs. The new measures are set to take effect at midnight. Robian Williams reports.
Since taking office in January, Trump has imposed several of the measures. To date, taxes have been imposed on aluminum, steel, and vehicles, along with increased levies on all goods from China. Trump argued that the tariffs will help U.S. manufacturers protect jobs and prevent migrants and drugs from reaching the U.S. In retaliation, a number of other countries have introduced their own tariffs on goods imported from the U.S. However, the 47th U.S. president has not backed down. Trump says a group of over 60 countries will be charged a tariff on imported goods at half the rate they charge the U.S.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal.
President Trump unveiled a 10% tariff on UK goods and 20% for the EU. China will receive a 34% tariff on all goods. President Trump further announced a 25% tariff on all imported automobiles.
None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Robian Williams for Nationwide News.
The Independent Commission of Investigation, INDECOM, says police fatal shootings have increased year over year since 2020 to reach their highest point in nearly a decade. That's according to its quarterly report tabled in the House of Representatives on Tuesday. Siobhan Campbell has been going through the document.
A total of 189 people have been killed by the country's security forces in 2024. That's a 22% increase from 2023. It's an increase INDECOM has labeled as concerning. However, more concerning, according to the oversight body, is the established trend over the last 5 years. INDECOM says there's been a year-on-year increase in police fatal shootings. The sum moved from 86 in 2019 to 115 in 2020 and has climbed every year since. According to INDECOM, the 2024 fatality figure is a 41% increase over 2022 and equates to a 120% increase since 2019. The vast majority of fatal shootings over the period were attributed to the police, with the military accounting for only 4 in 2024. Further concerning to INDECOM is the ratio of people shot and killed versus those injured in police confrontations. The oversight body says the pattern of security force shooting incidents in Jamaica is such that there are always more people killed than injured in reported security force encounters. The ratio between individuals killed and injured has remained relatively constant at approximately 2/3 killed and 1/3 injured. In 2024, over 71% of shooting victims resulted in a fatality. That's also an increase over 2023, where the ratio was 61 to 39%. INDECOM says while every police shooting is potentially a fatal event, there is an expectation that in security force shooting incidents, more persons would be wounded than killed. It says where the number of persons killed is greater than those shot and injured, it can be a determinative factor in assessing whether there may be an excessive level of deadly force being deployed. It should be noted that 24 members of the security forces were charged for various offenses by INDECOM in 2024. Of that number, only 8 were charged for fatal shootings. Jamaicans for Justice sounded the alarm over the increase in police fatal shootings throughout 2024. However, the JCF has remained somewhat unmoved by the criticism. In a rare statement, Police Commissioner Dr. Kevin Blake issued a forceful response on the matter.
I strongly support the view that the number of fatal shootings is too high. However, the call is wrongly directed and should be aiming at those who make the decision to challenge a far more superior force. And so let me encourage Jamaican for Justice to be more responsible in their public pronouncements, especially when the nation is aware of its members' proven ability to comprehend the most basic and fundamental principles of security. To suggest that fatal shooting numbers can be reduced by anything other than the unwillingness of persons being apprehended to engage in deadly confrontation with members of the security forces is irresponsible, or at best, advocating for us to relent in our pursuit.
Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
Minister with Responsibility for Works, Robert Morgan, says the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project SHIP is nearing completion, with other infrastructure projects now being added to the government's pipeline. The minister gave an update in the House of Representatives on Tuesday.
The Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project is another testament to our commitment to infrastructure development. A $575 million project. I can announce today that the project is 96% complete, with two major components: Part A, Maypens to Williamsfield Toll Road, and Part B, Harbourview to Yallahs Bridge, covering 7.4 kilometers of a 4-lane highway already open to the public. Works are progressing on the Yallahs to Port Antonio and Morant Bay to Cedar Valley legs, which span 123 kilometers of 2-lane roadway.
The SHIP aims to improve the main road spanning 16 kilometers from Harbourview to Yallahs Bridge at a cost of approximately $525 million. The minister also says significant progress has been made under the government's Spark and Reach road rehabilitation initiatives and the more recently announced bridge repair program. He also gave an update on the status of several other major roadworks across the country.
Let us build a future that is strong, and before I leave, I want to just run through some of the projects that we're doing. Grange Lane, $925 million, 90% complete. Brayton to Hellshire Main Road, contract awarded $2.4 billion. Right? Arthur Wint, Tom Redcom Drive, PIM studies submitted to the Ministry of Finance, $3.5 billion. East Kings House Road to Lady Musgrave, our studies have been completed, $4 billion. New entry to Portmore, studies have been completed, $4 billion. Sandy Gully Bridge, Kenhill Drive, studies completed, $500 million. Troy Bridge in Tulani, 50% complete.
Robert Morgan, Minister with Responsibility for Works.
Meanwhile, Minister Morgan called on Jamaicans to compare the level of investment in the country's roads between the current Andrew Holness administration and the previous PNP administration. He pointed to the allocations to the National Works Agency under both administrations.
In 2014-2015, the estimated allocation to the National Works Agency for emergency road repairs, river training, gullies, bridge development, maintenance of secondary roads, traffic management, and island-wide disaster mitigation was $202 million. 2015-16, the estimates of expenditure tabled in this House for the categories I listed, emergency repairs, river training, gullies, and so on, was $523 million. That's what they spent. In the revised estimates of 2016-2017, there was a spending of $2 billion.
Minister Morgan went further, noting that the current administration's allocations to roads have only increased year over year with the exception of the COVID-19 period. He says this was topped off in the last financial year with the largest ever investment in the country's roads in Jamaica's independent history.
But that's not it alone. Our expenditure, remember, we're coming from 2014 where only $500 million was spent. No, literally spent. In 2014-15, only $562 million was spent on roads in Jamaica. Compared to 2017-2018, where this Andrew Holness administration spent $3.8 billion on roads. 2024-2025, $8.785 billion has been spent on roads. This is the largest expenditure on roads infrastructure in Jamaica. Never before, no other government has invested as much in our road infrastructure.
Robert Morgan, Minister with Responsibility for Works.
You're listening to Nationwide News at 5. More news after these.
Rentokil Initial offers air purification solutions with triple filtration and unique auto-sensing capabilities that neutralizes malodor and replaces it with clean air. Call Rentokil Initial at 926-4236 for more details.
The temperature by Rentokil is
31 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 29 out west in Montego Bay. Continuing the news, President of the National Association of Deans of Discipline, Dr. Renee Level, says poor behavior from parents remains a big issue for deans island-wide. This follows a meeting held with representatives of the Ministry of Education at its Heroes Circle headquarters in Kingston. Speaking with Nationwide News after the meeting, Dr. Level says more parenting workshops by the Ministry of Education can help curb issues such as these.
The Ministry of Education need to do more parenting workshop, collaborate with the parents, and also the government need to let parents understand that they need to ensure that they reinforce the discipline within their child, and if their child comes on to say something to them, they go to the school and find out that matter. They can't go to the school and then want to attack a staff member, whether it's the dean of discipline or the principal or the teachers. And we have seen that happen in various schools. So I strongly believe that if the ministry called out to the parents, tell the parents that they need to show some respect to us in the school system, then I think that will help the system.
The meeting also brought to light the issue deans have with ensuring students get to school and refrain from truancy. Dr. Level believes greater police presence at bus centers can aid in making sure students don't loiter during the hours they should be on their way to school.
Yes, as deans of discipline would have to go into the bus park or into the community to ensure our students are safe and coming to school. So within the help of the police, then I'm confident enough that we will see improvement in that aspect of it.
All right, and another.
Dr. Renee Level, President of the National Association of Deans of Discipline. March 30 to April 5 is being observed as Deans of Discipline Week island-wide.
Renowned Jamaican stage, television, and movie actor Munir Zaka has died. It's understood he passed away on Wednesday morning. He was 80 years old. Shalois Michael takes a brief look at the life and career of Zaka.
Born on July 14 in 1945, Munir Zaka was an icon of the stage and big screen. He's best known for his role as Jason Sonny T. Tavares in the locally produced drama Royal Palm Estate, along with its spin-off The Blackburns. The notable series, which was first aired in 1994, centers around an old sugar manor in Jamaica. Zaka's role as Sonny T quickly became a household name as the diabolical character the audience loved to hate. Producer, director, and writer of the series, Lenny Littlewhite, described Zaka as the classic method actor who became the part he played.
He actually visualized himself in the role, and so that what gave it so much authenticity. He was very self-confident, and nothing daunted him. He felt he could do anything, but when he got into acting, he zoned out everything and became the part. And I think that is why Jamaica took on to him so much, because he was definitely one of the most popular or known actors in Royal Palm Estate. So his characterization and his dedication always made him special on the set and what he saw on the screen.
White says Zaka left an indelible mark in the field of arts.
He has been in movies, he has been on stage, in theater, he's been on television, so he's an all-purpose actor. The fact that he should play a multifaceted role in all kinds of acting, every kind of medium, made him very special. And not many people people have achieved that in as wide a cross-section of discipline, and that's what makes them special.
Other than Royal Palm, Zaka is known for playing roles in other movies such as Shutters, Better Must Come, Destiny, and Fool's Paradise. Here is a clip from Zaka as Mr. Anderson in Shutters.
Wayne, election is coming up, and I cannot afford to have any unnecessary wrongs in my constituency. You're going to have to work with me, Wayne.
So what you want me to do for you now, sir?
As you know, I have a very good connection at the embassy. I need you to leave Jamaica. I will get you and your friends the visa, and you leave the island and go cool out for a while, because I can't take the heat that is about to come down on me.
Shalois Michael for Nationwide News.
World in a Minute is brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology and integrity.
The World in a Minute.
The Ministry of Health in Trinidad and Tobago is investigating an outbreak of malaria cases. According to the ministry, 5 cases have been confirmed to date. The first confirmed case was recorded on March 27 this year. It says the cases include the primary source, making it the first recorded case of malaria in the country for the year. The ministry says the 5 cases are clustered within a well-defined geographic area. As such, vector control measures have been activated by the Insect Vector Control Division. Public health officials have also carried out necessary screening protocols, including contact tracing. The ministry says since the Twin Island is not endemic for malaria, most confirmed cases are either imported or introduced. Between 2015 and 2024, there were 153 confirmed cases.
A federal judge has permanently dismissed the criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The dismissal comes weeks after the Trump administration directed prosecutors to drop the corruption charges. The move led to the resignation of Manhattan's top federal prosecutor, who accused Adams of striking a deal with the government to dismiss his case in exchange for immigration enforcement. The Manhattan judge dismissed the case with prejudice. This means the Department of Justice cannot refile the charges against Adams based on the same evidence. U.S. District Judge Dale Ho says he was unconvinced by the department's logic that the case against Adams was preventing the mayor from enforcing Trump's immigration actions. Adams was charged with conspiracy, fraud, soliciting illegal campaign contributions, and bribery. He denied any wrongdoing.
Senate Republicans are facing pressure Wednesday from President Donald Trump to oppose a Democratic resolution that would nullify the presidential emergency on fentanyl he is using to implement tariffs on Canada. Just hours after Trump announced his plan for import taxes on a slew of international trading partners, his so-called Liberation Day, the Senate was expected to vote on a resolution that offers Republicans an off-ramp to the import taxes on Canada. The votes of at least 4 Republicans were thought to be lining up in favor of the resolution. If all Democrats plus the 4 Republicans vote in favor, it would boost it to the simple majority needed to pass the Senate. The legislation would still need to be brought up and passed in the Republican-controlled House.
World in a Minute was brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology and integrity.
Recapping the top stories making nationwide news at this hour, U.S. President Donald Trump announces a 10% tariff on Jamaican exports to the American market.
And Trump says his sweeping new tariffs are a declaration of America's economic independence.
This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back, and we're going to come back very strongly.
Indicom says police fatal shootings have increased year over year since 2020 to reach their highest point in nearly a decade.
Munir Zaka remembered as the classic method actor.
I'm Robeanne Williams.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
You can find the news on our website at nationwideradiojm.com and on Nationwide app, available on Google Play and the App Store. News next tomorrow morning at 6.
Don't fall victim to deepfakes.
Watch out.
Protect yourself.
How are this
For
on my
more
TV?
information, visit broadcastingcommission.org or
Here ya,
scan
baby.
the QR code on screen.
Deepfake. No deepfake can't catch me.
Junior, you know say AI can make something will look and sound just like you? One day Junior get a voice note from her granny. Say the food done, the medication done, and she need money urgently.
Need money urgently. But Miss Pat no like ask people for things.
And as so comes, Judy get suspicious.
So what she do?
She asks the neighbor fi go check pan her. Junior, the lady quite alright over there make her Sunday dinner.
So the voice note a deepfake.
Yes, my love. Come, your food ready.
Right now it look like we have to outsmart the AI. But wait. I really want dege dumpling you give me.
Me I wonder if AI can make one deep fake dumpling for you.
To learn more about deepfakes, visit www.broadcastingcommission.org.
Sports at 5 is brought to you by Total Tools. They almost always have it.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Sports here on Nationwide 90 FM. I'm Wayne Walker. The Jamaica Scorpions were 164 for 6 at sports time on day 1 of their 6th round regional 4-day game against the Trinidad and Tobago Red Force. The game being played at the Brian Lara Stadium in Tarouba. Javel Glenn is not out on 42, but the top score has so far come from Jermaine Blackwood, who made 61, while Kirk McKenzie went for 31. Carrie Pear and Joshua James have so far taken 2 wickets apiece, and the game will be going on for another 2 or so hours because it's the pink ball game for this round. Each round they have a game featuring the pink ball, and this game between the Jamaica Scorpions and the Trinidad and Tobago Red Force is the one which started at midday Jamaica time today. Over at the Darren Sammy Stadium, Sonny Lambrey slammed 110 with 13 fours as the Windward Islands Volcanoes were bowled out for 186 against the Barbados Pride, who closed on 94 for 5 with Kyle Mayers not out on 40. Over at Warner Park in Bastyr St. Kitts, the Leeward Islands Hurricanes are en route to first innings points over champions, the Guyana Harpy Eagles. The Harpy Eagles were dismissed for 193 thanks to Kevlon Anderson 77, Kimo Paul 31 and Ronaldo Ali Mohammed 30 against Rakeem Cornwall 3 for 35. O'Shane Thomas, the Jamaican, bagged 2 wickets. The Hurricanes at close, they reached 143 for 4. Mikhail Louise 73 has so far led the batting. The West Indies Academy, in the meantime, reached 37 for 1 at stumps, and they're responding to 238 all-outs made by the combined campuses and colleges team at the Sir Frank Worrell Memorial Ground in Trinidad and Tobago. Shakir Paris, 52, Kyle Corbin, 48, and Johan Jeremiah, the captain, 47, were the top scorers for CCC against the impressive 6 for 78 bowling by Joshua Bishop. Some news now on football. Mount Pleasant Academy, where they're on their way to a 6-point lead at the top of the Ray and Nephew Jamaica Premier League standings. They are leading Vere United by 3-0 in Clarendon with just about 5 or so minutes to go in that game. Michael Joseph and Raheem Edwards were among the scorers for Mount Pleasant Academy, who will now move to 72 points this evening. Portmore United, they beat Malines United by a goal to lead at Ferdinica Park a short while ago, and they remain 4th on 57 points. Shackwell Henry scored the winner. And Racing United, they failed to jump into that 6th and final playoff spot. They were held goalless by Harbourview at Compound. The game finished about a minute or so ago. The league continues on Thursday with 4 more games. Waterhouse and Montego Bay United will meet in the pick of the bunch at Julesland in a 6 o'clock kickoff. Champions Cavalier will visit the Edward Seaga Complex to face Tivoli Gardens. Humber Lion and Arnott Gardens meet at Effortville Community Centre, while Chapelton Maroons and Dunby Holden, they'll square off at Royal Lakes. Portuguese international Diogo Jota scored a 57th minute winner as Liverpool beat Everton 1-0 in the Merseyside derby at Anfield today to restore their 12-point gap in the English Premier League. The win moved the Reds to 73 points, well clear of second place Arsenal, who've got 61 points.
So can't be offside. Great work to get away. Van Dijk. Gravenberg. Tarkovsky with the interception. Diaz's flick. Jota dancing to score in the Merseyside derby. His first goal in 11 games for Liverpool. It's a big breakthrough for title-hunting Liverpool.
Champions Manchester City moved ominously into the top four with a 2-0 win over Leicester City at the Etihad. Goals coming from Jack Grealish and Omar Marmoush. Leon Bailey was not on the match card today as Aston Villa blanked Brighton and Hove Albion by 3-0 in London. Newcastle United turned back Brentford 2-1. Ipswich defeated Bournemouth by 2-1 and Southampton played out a 1-1 draw with Crystal Palace on England's south coast. The game was at St Mary's. And that will do it for sports.
Sports at 5 was brought to you by Total Tools. They almost always have it.
Since 2016, 253,000 more Jamaicans are working. That's 28,000 new jobs each year. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is
5:30.
Get the inside scoop. Tune in to Budget Bites, a brief breakdown of the 2025 budget presentation by Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness. It's an informative snapshot of the budget and what it means for you. Don't miss Budget Bites, bite-sized insights into the Prime Minister's vision for Jamaica. Budget Bites, unpacking the budget for you.
FinSAC was a homegrown domestic crisis wholly caused by the PNP, for which we are now only just recovering. Our debt to GDP prior to the advent of the FinSAC crisis was 72%. The government at the time established FinSAC to bail out the collapsed financial institutions. This bailout cost the country 42% of GDP. In other words, 42% of what we produce in any 1 year, we had to take it to pay for FinSAC. By way of comparison, the US government's bailout intervention during the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 was only 9% of their GDP. So you see the magnitude of the scale of FinSAC relative to the size of our economy. Within 6 years after the establishment of FinSAC, our debt spiraled out of control from 72% of GDP to 130% of GDP, almost doubling. That caused interest costs alone on the debt to consume almost 70% of tax revenues. So just the cost to pay for the debt, the interest at one point cost us 70% of all the tax revenues that we collect. If you add public sector wages to that and other things that you have to pay for out of tax revenue, then you basically would have no money left. You would have no money left to fix roads, no money left to build schools, no money left to repair clinics, no money left to pay for water. So if you ever wondered why we have so much infrastructure that has been left unmaintained and now falling apart, if you ever wondered why things are the way they are, it's an important point that needs to be made, because the average man listening might, in the background of the shrill of noise that we hear, this might go way back in their memory. And they see a pothole emerge in a road, and they wonder, why doesn't the government fix that pothole now? But they will never stop and reflect on a very important point, that when this road was built 30 or 40 years ago, what should have happened is that there should have been a reserve maintenance programmed into the budget, matched with what they call the engineered life of the road, that as a little crack emerges, out of the revenues that you have, you go and you use some tar chemical and you seal that crack. So no pothole appears. But that road that you are looking at now, that the potholes are all emerging, they weren't maintained. And the reason why they couldn't be maintained is because we had to take almost 70% of our tax revenues to pay for the bad policy choices of the PNP during the 1990s and FinSAC. I want Jamaicans to understand that lack of maintenance accumulates. Lack of spending on infrastructure amounts to what is called disinvestment. So you can build a hospital, but if you don't maintain a schedule of maintenance, the value of that hospital declines, depreciates. So today when you look at the hospital and say, why this government don't do something about it? Even if this government were to take all the money it has now, it couldn't today immediately halt and stop the deterioration. I think the public must understand this, because, Madam Speaker, it is the same public that voted in the same PNP government over and over and over again. It is a point that needs to be understood, that the economic struggle that the country has had to restore its economy is so that it is able to have revenues steady and stable and predictable that it can then use to maintain and provide the things you want over a long period without making bad decisions to put those revenues in peril. If you want to know what drives me, Madam Speaker, is to make sure that we never go back. So if you want to know what is the root of our problems today, it is the bad policies of the PNP in the 1990s. They don't like to hear this, and 90% of Jamaica may not appreciate and understand it, but we're going to bring the facts.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
More savings, more choices. Get active with Active Home Center. The one-stop shop for everything for your home. We have more savings, more choices, unbelievable prices. Wide selection with the latest styles. The kitchen, bathroom, right down to the tile. Buy the hottest items on spot, don't miss out. Best options under one roof, no doubt. More savings, more choices.
Visit us in store or online at www.activehomecenter.com.
We have more savings, more choices.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Cover Story is brought to you by Hyundai. Modern, premium, affordable vehicles.
Experience the joy of buying a brand new Hyundai without breaking the bank. Yes, buying a brand new car should never leave you broke. From stylish designs and safety features to comfortable driving and reliability, Hyundai is the choice. Hyundai vehicles come standard with 2 years free service and 5 years warranty and roadside assistance for your peace of mind. Drive 2 years without service cost and 5 years without fear of being stranded. Hyundai. Conditions apply.
Good afternoon, listeners, and good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to the cover story. I am Siobhan Campbell. I am coming at you from the University Regional Headquarters across from the prestigious UWI Mona campus for the 35th annual Grace Kennedy Public Lecture under the theme Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. But that's a little later in the day. We're actually going to be starting with something else. And sorry, I completely forgot my host, Sanjay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Siobhan, and good afternoon to our listeners. And as you indicated, our focus for the cover story this afternoon is that announcement made by President Donald Trump. And U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 10% tariff on Jamaican exports to the American market. The president announced the new tariffs in a media conference at the White House on Wednesday.
We will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%, and that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept.
And according to President Trump, the tariff is in retaliation for the 10% tariff now charged by Jamaica on U.S. imports. St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Kitts and Antigua are among the Caribbean countries that will see a 10% tariff applied to their exports.
Nearly 60 countries across the world have been hit with tariffs ranging from 10% to as high as 40%. China, countries in the European Union, Taiwan, and Vietnam are among the hardest hit. It's one of the most sweeping impositions of tariffs in U.S. history. Trump says the tariffs are aimed at protecting American markets from unfair global practices. Economists have warned the tariffs could spark a global trade war and significant inflation.
Meanwhile, President Trump says it's Liberation Day in America as he announced his sweeping new tariffs. Robian Williams reports.
Well, I'm not hearing myself.
And we're still here on Nationwide at 5. We don't have that report from Robian Williams, but we're going to jump directly to our guests. And we have with us the Executive Director at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, Dr. Damien King. Good afternoon, Dr. King.
Good afternoon, Sanjay. Good afternoon, Siobhan.
Good afternoon.
And thank you.
Sanjay, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you, Siobhan.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. King, let me start with you. What are the potential economic consequences of these sweeping tariffs for global trade?
Well, global trade is based on the idea that goods are generally produced where they use up the fewest resources, where they are cheapest to produce. And if everybody participates in that, then global production is most efficient, and therefore you get the most output from the world's resources. So when you start to put barriers in place to to make it not possible to take advantage of that, then what is going to happen is global trade is going to diminish, and therefore global productivity is going to diminish. So the world is going to have a smaller output of goods and services to divide amongst itself. So we are going to see a global recession. We're certainly going to see a recession in the U.S., and we are going to see a global recession, and that means, a small open economy like Jamaica is going to feel the consequences of that, regardless of whether we get 10% more tariffs or not.
And please, Dr. King, go a little explain more about the impact, at least your assessment of this impact, how this 10% baseline tariff on all imports, not only Jamaica, but on all exports to the United States.
Sorry, what's the question?
What impact assessment? Just give me an impact assessment. How do you see that affecting the average Jamaican here?
Well, as I sort of just explained, what import tariffs do is it moves production from where it is most efficient. In the case of the U.S., it's going to move production from where it is most efficient to inside the U.S., where in many cases it is less efficient. So let's take, for example, his tariffs on cars and his overall tariffs. What Trump wants to do is to move manufacturing back to the U.S. But the reason why manufacturing left the U.S. in the first place is because the U.S. is not an efficient place. It is not a low-cost place to do manufacturing because wages are higher, because people in the U.S. they're higher skilled, and they can create greater value added by applying their skill to more value added parts of the production process. So the lower value added part, which is putting the things together, the manufacturing, moves somewhere else. By forcing that manufacturing back into the U.S., he's therefore going to manufacturing is now going to be produced at a higher cost in the U.S. And so therefore, resources are going to move from higher value added parts of the supply chain to lower value added parts, which is screwing things together. Anybody can screw things together. That don't take high skill. So the U.S. is going to have a recession. And therefore, you're going to have a global recession because things are now being produced where they are less efficiently produced.
Mm-hmm. And looking on then, Dr. King, this argument that the President Trump put forward that it will push more companies to manufacture goods in the U.S. Yes, that may be true, but then, as you indicated, it's going to be more costly for those goods, correct?
Not only is it going to be more costly for those goods, manufacturing is now going to draw resources and investment away from where the U.S. actually has an advantage in producing higher value-added parts of the supply chain. Mm-hmm. So, one of the reasons why the U.S. takes farm workers from Jamaica is because it doesn't make sense for U.S. labor to spend its greater capacity, its more productive capacity, picking things off of trees. Mm-hmm. So that is actually a metaphor and an example of why certain production takes place in the rest of the world, and it's more efficient and a better use of resources for the U.S. not to have that production in the U.S. Right. Manufacturing is the same thing, just on a larger scale. So he's forcing production to take place within the U.S. borders where it is not the best use of resources.
Mm-hmm. But, and Dr. King, let's face it, we this grand announcement today, based on everything that you're saying, do you foresee the president maybe walking back this announcement that he makes maybe a couple months down the line?
No, because the reason why President Trump always talks about tariffs is instituting tariffs. And a lot of his, this is not a surprise, He spoke about the value of tariffs when he was campaigning. He believes in tariffs because he believes in three factors that are fundamentally wrong. He believes that tariffs are paid for by foreign countries. He says that many times. He says that, he mentioned in his speech that one of the reasons why the U.S. introduced an income tax is because they lost the revenue from import tariffs. That is absolutely not true. Tariffs are not paid for by foreign countries. Tariffs are paid for by the consumer in the country that's doing the importing. So that's going to come as a shock to him. The second myth is that he thinks that tariffs attract investment. No, what tariffs do is it shifts investment from where the country has a comparative advantage to to where it is less efficient. So it doesn't net increase foreign investment. And the third myth is that low tariffs are a favor that you do to other countries that then take advantage of you by sending goods to you. And again, that is also not correct. Low tariffs are a way for the country, the domestic country, to take advantage of other countries' natural advantages. But because he believes these three myths, he believes tariffs are a good thing in and of themselves. They were always going to come, and he's not going to roll them back.
And Dr. King, when it comes to the specific industries here in Jamaica that would most likely be hardest hit, what do you believe those would be?
Well, it's going to be anything that we export anywhere in the world, because this step in deglobalization is going to lead to a global recession. Then the U.S. is going to contract the most, but other countries are going to contract as well. And it means that they are going to be buying less of all of our exports, no matter where they are going.
Well, we definitely have to leave you there, Dr. King. Thank you as always for your insight. Dr. Damien King is the Executive Director at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI. Thank you for your time, Dr. King.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to take the break, and then when we come back, we're going to be joined by social and political commentator Dr. Karen Dunkley to weigh in on this matter. And she's also a member of the diaspora over there in the United States. We take the break.
Since the month of January 2025, the Spanish Town Depot has started 5 new routes in Clarendon.
The new JUTC route is a game changer. It's affordable, comfortable, and so convenient. I can get to and from work, no hassle.
The government are looking out for it.
We're grateful here at Chapelton for JUTC to extend their service to us, where our students can come to school and go home safely in nice, clean, comfortable environments.
I am grateful for the JUTC bus because it is safe and it is even safe for the students to travel.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
As we grow older, there are many challenges that we have to confront, but these years can represent the best in our lives. Coming of Age during Nationwide This Morning on Thursdays explores issues persons 50 and over confront. It also provides expert opinions on how we can improve the quality of our lives as we get older. That's Coming of Age, this and every Thursday during Nationwide This Morning at 6:51 a.m.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to the cover story. We're discussing the global trade situation after the Trump administration announced sweeping tariffs, 10% baseline to all foreign goods imported into the United States, and specific countries get hit with as much as, in some cases, 40%. We have with us now social and political commentator Dr. Karen Dunkley to discuss further. Good afternoon, Dr. Dunkley.
Good afternoon to you and your listeners. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Dr. Dunkley, just to say, your reaction to this announcement by President Trump, and what do you feel are the implications, not only for global trade, but here locally in Jamaica?
I think the reaction is interesting. So one of the things that's certainly happening in the United States is that the conversation is a constitutional one and an economic one, whether or not president can constitutionally impose tariffs. So we do know that under the U.S. Constitution, their Article 1 in Section 8, it gives the Congress explicit power to collect taxes and impose duties. And that authority constitutionally belongs to Congress and not the president. So there is that conversation that is happening right now is to what extent can the United States president impose a tariff? To what extent does that continue to be legal? We do know that in some instances, we've seen that Congress can delegate this authority to the president. It's under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, I think, that allows for national security reasons, as well as under the Trade Act of 1974, which allows the President of the United States to retaliate against what they describe as unfair trading practices by other countries. So right now, as we look at what the tariffs will mean, I can tell you what the markets are saying. I think there's a constitutional aspect. The economic reaction is simply tariffs cannot be good for any economy. We see here, if you looked at what happened to the stock on both the S&P and the Dow, we see tremendous deficits, tremendous downturn. We know that tariffs, they said the more trade that a country does is the wealthier. It's proportional to wealth, right? So trade is proportional to wealth. The more you trade, it's the wealthier because you're exchanging goods and services. So economically, tariffs lead, obviously, to higher prices. As a consumer, I am most interested in what gets me the lowest price. And just in terms of the law of economics, that is going to become very problematic for an economy that really relies on so many existing trade relationships. One more thing just before we shift, of course, to Jamaica land we love, is if you look at what has happened, Mexico and Canada have had their tariffs delayed because they have promised increased border security, and the presidents of these countries responded fairly quickly around the worldwide tariff issue.
Right. Which leads me to my next question, Dr. Dunkley. Do you think that the Jamaican government and diaspora organizations should advocate for policy changes to protect Caribbean economic interests?
I think absolutely. In fact, we need to organize, and it's something that we have yet to become solidified in, is to organize a Caribbean lobbying group that is powerful, that is relevant and influential enough to really to take on some of these issues. If it is that we had a Secretary of State visit where we were billed as the most like-minded partner in the region, to come on the heels of that a few days later to this 10% tariff, where we are a vulnerable island state, really vulnerable to what we're now going to experience as an external shock. So I think when you think about where our GDP lies in terms of remittance, in terms of tourism, absolutely the diaspora, as well as I think, quite frankly, the Jamaican government, I know they're thinking about this. They have to be strategizing around this. Jamaica exports over 60% of the goods that we export goes to the United States. And so when you think about the industries, or banana or manufactured goods, or bauxite or alumina, we have to begin to think about what is going to happen. Will it impact demand? Will higher prices now make our products obviously less attractive to U.S. buyers? And then we have to think about the profit margin erosion. You would be amazed how many people and persons I know personally, and these are business leaders in America, certainly in the Northeast corridor as well as in the West, and they are actually in favor of the tariffs because they're saying that it's about time to buy American and to focus on American, and that we should absorb the shocks of the tariffs as the exporter. So that is going to dip into profit margin and or will lead to profit margin erosion and just sector instability. So we have every reason to be concerned.
And tell me, Dr. Dunkley, you suggested that the power that Trump is using to impose these tariffs might not necessarily be constitutionally allowable. Do you see any potential pushback from the Congress in the United States? And further, do you see the ability for that lobbying on the part of the Caribbean to be effective in potentially getting some level of clemency from this action from the Trump administration?
I think that Congress will not. I think that they will refuse to pass the tariffs. I think because the tariffs are wholesale. Initially, when the president took on this, if you remember now, this is tariff 2.0 because this president started to implement and activate tariffs at the end of his tenure in his first go-round as president. So what has happened is there was this talking around China and China becoming this monster, this giant, that they wanted to limit and really stymie the impact of China in terms of its economic reach. But what we saw today was that the tariffs are wholesale to what they're describing in the United States as the friend and foe alike. So I think because of this, that Congress will certainly, through whatever machinations they decide to employ, that they will absolutely not support the tariff. Based on what we've seen, we've heard from the different Congress people now, here is where it gets interesting. Will those who can and should really deny the president? So, because I don't think they will want to upset the base, and that is my concern with the Republican Party, is will they do what is right for the American consumer by not wishing to upset the base to deny the president the passage of this tariff? And so it's yet to be seen if they will have the courage to take on the president, to let them know that they disagree with the tariff and therefore will block the vote.
That is social and political commentator Dr. Karen Dunkley. Thank you for joining us, Madam Dunkley.
Thank you.
And earlier we also had with us Executive Director at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, Dr. Damian King. Well, time will only tell how this will impact global trade and what will be the reaction from, well, several countries across the world in retaliation to what the Trump administration has done today. I'm sure we'll not be hearing the last about this.
Certainly, indeed, Siobhan. Let's see what will happen as the days go by.
Well, listeners, that is it for the cover story. And when we come back from the break, we will now shift gears back to the Grace Kennedy annual, the 35th annual public lecture under the theme Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. More after this.
Cover Story was brought to you by Hyundai. Modern, premium, affordable vehicles.
My Mega
With so much to do in one location, make Megamart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills. Fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy. All in one amazing location. My Megamart, the best value by far.
Maxfield Bakery, breads and buns and
Maxfield Bakery for breads and buns and bullets too. It's Maxfield Bakery for the best Easter bun, you know that's
Maxfield Easter Bun, the juicy fruity Easter bun. Order online and send abroad at maxfieldbakery.com or call Maxfield Bakery at 926-2160 or 929-3897 and get yours before they're done. Scatter says so.
Trauma can impact more than just your childhood. It can shape your future. Tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. as we broadcast live from the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, on April 2. Join Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, a leading expert in psychiatry, as he explores the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and the path to recovery. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. So tune in to Nationwide at 5 from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2 for the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation lecture, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. Register now at Grace Kennedy Foundation's Eventbrite page to watch the live stream. Don't miss it. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to Nationwide News. As I said earlier, we are at the UWI Regional Headquarters, just across from the UWI Mona campus, for the 35th Annual Grace Kennedy Public Lecture, and that's under the theme... that's under the theme Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. We have with us to discuss this further before the lecture gets underway, Caroline Mahfood. She's the CEO of the Grace Kennedy Foundation. Good afternoon, Madam Mahfood.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us today.
So 35 years of public lectures, and for this theme we're talking about childhood trauma. Explain to us, why was that theme chosen for this year?
Well, we think that a lot of people are suffering in silence, and we recognize the fact that it's a public health crisis. It's part of the reason why we have the violence that we have in our society, why our education system is struggling. There are a lot of issues that stem from childhood trauma, and as the title says, it's breaking that cycle, because we think it's really critical if we want our country, our economy to grow, that we try and address this issue.
And I mean, a lot of Jamaicans don't really understand the impact and the incidence of childhood trauma. Can you just give us an understanding as to how this manifests and what are some of the implications for its manifestation in Jamaican children?
Absolutely. I mean, the verbal abuse that children face, a lot of us as parents are under stress. We are working full days and coming home to deal with children, and it's, we lose it on them. We have a lot of children who are having learning disabilities that are not being recognized, so they're viewed as bad, giving trouble. Them don'ts when that's not the issue, and they get abused in that way. Then there's sexual abuse in a lot of our inner city communities, and not just there, everywhere. And it manifests in a lot of different ways: physical abuse, in marriages, divorce. All of these things affect children in a negative way.
Okay, and furthermore, it doesn't often come out to the average person when someone is essentially acting out as a result of trauma. What are those almost telltale signs that you should look out for when you're concerned that an individual may have some traumatic experience in their life that they need some assistance with?
Well, Prof is going to talk about that today, but what I will say is, you do see things like a child being very despondent, not really participating in school, acting out, being aggressive. I think there was just something in the news today about a pretty horrific case of an 11-year-old with a 6-year-old child. And, I heard that on online people are saying he should be hung. There's that child has gone through trauma, why he's doing what he's doing now. You know what I'm saying? And I think we need to face that fact and address it.
And how does Grace Kennedy, in terms of its attempt at this kind of outreach to assist Jamaicans in this particular way, how does this align with your mission?
Very, very closely. I don't know if you know this, but Grace Kennedy has had a counseling psychologist on staff.
Interesting.
For years through the Grace and Staff Community Development Foundation, and they really focus on homework programs around wherever our factories are, in a lot of inner city communities, downtown Kingston. And he counsels maybe 400 families a month. It's a pretty intense job that he has. In addition to that, for our own staff members, if we are going through any sort of crisis, or our children, we also can access free counseling. So it's a part of the Grace Kennedy ethos to take care. We care is really true in the actions that we show.
And I'm happy you brought that up. How would someone go about accessing that assistance from Grace Kennedy?
What happens is students are registered on our homework programs and they can go through. Other than that, they can actually go to the Grace and Staff Foundation and say, I need some help, I need some counseling. And I don't think they would ever turn their back on anyone who comes to their doors. That's just what we do.
I'm happy to hear it. And just going back to the lecture now, how should everyone, in terms of Jamaicans, interpret this lecture? Why should they listen? Why should they tune in right now to understand how we should go about breaking childhood trauma, or breaking the cycle rather?
You know, that's a great question, because I think for some people they might think, oh, well, this is just for the guidance counselors, this is for the psychologists. It's actually not, because, as you'll hear from Prof, 8 out of 10 people have faced childhood trauma. So we are all, if we stop and think, we have all gone through a lot. And the scary thing is that we can pass it on, right? We can pass it on from generation to generation, which he's also going to address. And that's why we need to talk about it, break the silence, and break that cycle for a better generation.
Okay, thank you, Caroline Mahfood. She's the CEO of the Grace Kennedy Foundation. I really appreciate it. And we
Thank
look
you.
forward to the lecture, which will be put on by, if I'm correct, Professor Wendell Abel.
That's correct.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good afternoon.
Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, is a financial reporting firm that delivers accounting and compliance services on time. Call us today at 876-908-0486-7. Email us at clientservices@cocnjamaica.com or visit our website at www.cocnjamaica.com. COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology, and integrity.
Plug into the sun with Peak Energy Solutions. We are your affordable provider for everything solar. Grid tie or off-grid solar P systems, solar air conditioners, panels, lithium batteries, solar supplies, and installation. Visit us at Shop 1, 3 Mosquito Valley Road, Red Hills, St. Andrew. Call 876-279-8820 or 944-0668. Or email us at peakenergysolutionsja@gmail.com. Peak Energy for everything solar.
Taboo topics, bulletins after dark,
Riveting discussions,
celebrity news and interviews,
topics that are shunned by society,
and everything else in between. Boyatings After Dark with Kareem Boyatings, each and every Wednesday, 8 to 11 p.m. Boyatings After Dark. No topic is too taboo or hard to discuss. Come get your mind blown and your curiosity explored. Boyatings After Dark.
As we grow older, there are many challenges that we have to confront, but these years can represent the best in our lives. Coming of Age during Nationwide This Morning on Thursdays explores issues persons 50 and over confront. It also provides expert opinions on how we can improve the quality of our lives as we get older. That's Coming of Age, this and every Thursday during Nationwide This Morning at 6:51 a.m.
Do you have a consumer-related issue? Want to learn more about matters concerning you as a consumer? Well, keep it locked to Nationwide 90 FM for the Consumer Hour with me, Nora Gay Banton. Weekdays from 9 to 10 a.m. For all your consumer-centric matters, stay tuned to the Consumer Hour on Nationwide 90 FM, a revolution in media.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to Nationwide at 5. We're going to head straight into the program that's Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. It's the Grace Kennedy Foundation's 35th annual public lecture that is going to be delivered by Professor Wendell Abel.
Gentleman he was, but highly knowledgeable and skilled in his field, both in practice and in theory. In reading Professor Abel's work, I couldn't help but think about my experiences when I was, for those of you who didn't know, but I was principal of St. George's College. It's a while back now, it's 20 years. And when I mention St. George's College, I always think of North Street, and I always think of Kingston College. And if there are any KC old boys here, I congratulate you on your championship. Are there any KC old boys here? Must be some. I know there's some Woolmerians here, for sure. A lot of Woolmerians. But anyway, at St. George's College, every month we would invite someone of note, usually a past student or an old boy, to speak to the boys. And on this one occasion that I remember, it's a long time now, it's 2005, we asked Father Michael Lewis, who was then the pastor, the priest at Stella Maris. And he came and he was the main celebrant at the cathedral. There were 1,500 boys out there in front of him. And he was visibly shaken, I remember. And the pace of his voice accelerated. And as he told the story of a recent trauma that he had had. And it had to do with him witnessing the shooting of an elderly lady who had come in that Saturday or that Sunday to clean the pews of the church. And it was somebody that he knew very well. And he had, I guess, was told the story of how he tried to save her life by taking in her car to the hospital, and she did not make it. She died before they got to the hospital. But I remember what he did then was he paused and he looked above the heads of those 1,500 boys, and he said to them, he said, how many of you out there have experienced in your lives and in your communities an incidence of violent crime? And I want to tell you, at least half, 700 hands went up like that, high in the air in the cathedral that day. But what Father Lewis did not know is that he really had unlocked the secrecy and the silence of a lot of the burden that those boys were keeping. And for weeks after that, we had guidance counselors on hand to hear out some of the stories that these boys were divulging of their traumas. St. George's College still is and was then very much of an inner city school, and a lot of the boys came from the South End and from Central Kingston. But schools, you know, are a lifeline for a lot of young people in Jamaica, and they fulfill a very important function in terms of the kinds of difficulties that they face in their homes. The statistics are staggering. As many as 8 out of every 10 young people in Jamaica are affected by adverse childhood experiences, and so pervasive that we are plagued by what Professor Abel calls a culture of violence in Jamaica. Professor Abel's work speaks to the critical need for awareness and action. I want to say a few words about the Grace Kennedy Foundation, because we do good work, and this is an example of the kinds of outreach that we have. The activities of the Grace Kennedy Foundation, from its inception, have been aligned with the strategic vision of our parent company. It was the brainchild of Mr. Carlton Alexander. Two of his sons are here. In 1982, which marked the 60th anniversary of Grace Kennedy. Those were optimistic times for Jamaica, and well, for private enterprise anyway. I won't get into the politics too much, but there was an upbeat in terms of, and a recovery in terms of private enterprise. So it was the right time to start new ventures, and the Grace Kennedy Foundation was certainly one of those. Carlton's vision was that the foundation would participate in and support national projects aimed at improvements in social and welfare conditions and those that were synonymous with Grace Kennedy's goals. And I think that is significant. And then Prime Minister, the Honorable Edward Seaga, and the Leader of the Opposition at the time, the Honorable Michael Manley, praised Grace Kennedy for what they called then its corporate citizenship. And the chief reason, in their words, quote, was that it has achieved such a unique stature and recognition. It is because of this that they have achieved such a unique stature and recognition as a company in Jamaica and in the world. We have evolved, and I don't say this modestly, but we have evolved into a world-class corporate foundation over a period of 43 years. In fulfilling a mission of We Care, we have increased the foundation's impact, and we're beginning to measure this impact that we're having on the economic and social well-being of Jamaicans by investing in sustainable projects in education, in the environment, and in health. In education, we continue to offer public lectures like this. We fund endowed chairs. Some of them are here. Professor Mona Weber is here. I see her. We've endowed chairs at the University of West Indies. We fund projects to support early childhood education and special needs students. We fund 90 tertiary scholarships annually. And in the environment, we have facilitated the implementation of Kingston Harbor Cleanup Project with the NGO, the Ocean Cleanup, which is investing millions of US dollars to prevent solid waste flowing into Kingston Harbor. And I think to date, if I'm not wrong, the measurement is somewhere in the region of 3,000 metric tons of garbage and plastics that have been taken out of Kingston Harbor. Without wanting to be too political, I just want to say that in this time of global instability, I think the role of civil society is especially critical. It's critical in terms of Jamaica's national development. NGOs, there are over 30 local Jamaican foundations like ours. They support marginalized sectors in society, and they contribute significantly to sustainable development. They play a very important role, along with private enterprise and the government, in achieving the vision of what Jamaica wants to be a developed country status by the year 2030. We play a critical role in helping Jamaica achieve that vision. Important also, I believe, in these times, the public lecture series promotes the value of free speech and thought leadership, which are right now under attack in the free world. They are core pillars upholding the development of a democratic society, fostering public debate, critical thinking, and informed decision-making. Those things are precious to democracy, as we are finding out right now. So let us reflect this evening, on the personal and collective roles that we each can play in addressing childhood trauma in our communities. Occurrences of childhood trauma, depression, addiction, other mental health conditions are widespread in Jamaica, and only through continued education and action can we hope to break the cycle. Welcome again, Professor Abel. We are really grateful for you to share your expertise tonight, and which will no doubt enhance our commitment to mental health advocacy. And we thank you, each of you, for joining us this evening, for caring and for engaging in dialogue to find ways to break the cycle of childhood trauma. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing such a...
That was the welcome and announcements, listeners, from Dr. Fred Kennedy. He's the chairman of Grace Kennedy Foundation. And the master of ceremonies is Professor Julie Meeks Gardner. She's the vice chair of the Grace Kennedy Foundation. We expect soon Mr. Frank James to deliver a video message. He's the group CEO for Grace Kennedy Limited.
But he has recorded a message to share his thoughts and express his support for this important lecture. His appreciation for the work of the Grace Kennedy Foundation and his commitment to addressing critical societal issues like childhood trauma are unwavering. So without further delay, let us turn to the screen for his message.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 35th Annual Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture. I am truly sorry that I can't be there with you in person tonight, but I'm very excited that you're all here for what promises to be a truly impactful discussion. A huge thank you to Professor Abel for accepting our GK Foundation's invitation to be this year's distinguished lecturer. We've been looking forward to this conversation, especially because Professor Abel is bringing his own childhood experiences into the discussion. I know that personal perspective will make his insights even more powerful. Too many children in Jamaica face serious trauma and adversity. That's why it is so important for us to talk about its impact and how we can help our children heal. When we address childhood trauma, we're not just helping individual children, we're building strong families, communities, and a better future for all of us. At Grace Kennedy, we are deeply committed to being part of the solution. Through our Grace and Staff Community Development Foundation, we offer free counseling services in the communities we serve across Jamaica. We also recognize that our team and their families may sometimes also need support, which is why we provide free counseling for them as well. We are grateful to have experts like Dr. Curtis Sweeney and Soshina White on our team, making sure these essential services are available. I encourage you all to fully engage with Professor Abel's lecture. Ask questions, challenge ideas, and think about how you can play a role in breaking the cycle of childhood trauma, whether in your family, workplace, or community. Even small actions can make a big difference. Let's leave tonight with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. Together, we can create a safer, more supportive Jamaican society where every child has a real chance to thrive. Thank you, and I hope you have a meaningful and inspiring discussion.
Before we introduce our lecturer, I actually didn't introduce myself. I'm Julie Meeks Gardner. I'm a director of the Grace Kennedy Foundation. So, before we introduce our lecturer, I'm going to share with you how the discussion session will be managed. There will be no live questions. On your digital program, you may click on the words Submit Your Questions, which will take you to slido.com, where you can submit your questions, so you'll have to type it in. If you don't already have access to the digital program, please scan the QR code on the screen. And if you are my age or older, you may ask someone to help you with this process. After clicking on the link, you will be prompted to write and submit your questions, and they are going to come to me magically, and I will relay them to Professor Abel. Please note that all audience members can like your question, and the more likes it has, the higher up on the ladder it will be moved. So we may not be able to accommodate all of the questions, but we're going to cover as many as we can in the time available. YouTube viewers, you may also enter your questions through Slido. Okay, I'm now going to invite to the podium Dr. Carol Hordat Gentles, Senior Lecturer in the School of Education from the University of the West Indies, Mona, and Chair of the Grace Kennedy Foundation's Education Committee, to introduce our esteemed lecturer for this evening. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carol Hordat Gentles.
Good evening, everyone. I can't believe it, Prof. The moment is here. So it is my distinct pleasure and a great privilege to introduce our speaker for this year's Grace Kennedy Foundation Annual Lecture, Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, OD, OJ, JP. As we focus tonight on the topic of breaking the cycle of childhood trauma, we are mindful that paying close attention to ensuring the personal and collective mental and physical well-being of our children is vital for our society now and in the future. We are delighted to have Prof. Abel, as many of us affectionately call him, to help us understand the factors that contribute to childhood trauma and how we as adults can help to mitigate this very serious challenge to the well-being of Jamaica. Prof. Abel's professional and personal accomplishments make him supremely qualified to give this lecture. He is a professor of mental health policy in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry in the Faculty of Medical Sciences at the University of the West Indies and consultant psychiatrist at the University Hospital of the West Indies, Mona. His professional credentials include a Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery and an Advanced Diploma in Psychiatry from the University of the West Indies, Mona, a Master of Public Health and Certificate in Addiction Studies from Johns Hopkins University, and a Doctor of Medicine from UWI Mona. As a leading Caribbean scholar, he has authored and co-authored over 100 academic papers, numerous newspaper articles, and case reports on mental health policy, depression, suicide and stigma, mental illness, clinical psychiatry, and psychotherapy. Professor Abel has been an important contributor to the crafting of formative mental health policies nationally and regionally. He has served as a consultant to the Government of Jamaica, the Pan American Health Organization, and CARICOM as an advisor in mental health. Professor Abel's outstanding efforts in raising public awareness about mental health issues, his advocacy and his activism for those suffering with mental illness have earned him national recognition. He received the Order of Distinction in 2007, an award from the Medical Foundation of Jamaica for his contribution to mental health and public education in 2013, the UWI Vice Chancellor's Award for Community Service in 2018, an RJR Gleaner Award of Excellence in Health and Wellbeing 2018, and the icing on the cake, the Order of Jamaica in 2024. And I believe you are one of 5 or 6 persons who've been bestowed with that honor, am I correct? So that's quite a distinction. Prof. Abel is recognized not only for his professional achievements, but also for the pride and passion he has for contributing to Jamaica. In an interview with the Gleaner on the occasion of receiving the RJR Gleaner Award of Excellence, he shared, "My vision for this country that I love dearly is that it becomes a place that we are all proud of to live, to work, to retire, and certainly to enjoy excellent health, including mental health." He is known for being a man of humility, who describes his life's work above all else as an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. We are so excited and honored to have him here to deliver the 2025 Grace Kennedy Foundation Lecture. Please join me in welcoming Professor the Honorable Wendell Abel, OD, OJ, JP, to the stage.
Like an easy road, and when me see the glamour and the glitter, so them think I bed a rose. Me say, who feels he knows?
Good evening, everyone. I have some notes here, but they're missing. Anyway, Thank you. Don't worry, I wasn't traumatized. But good evening, everyone. It is indeed my greatest pleasure to be with you here this evening. Let me pause to thank Grace Kennedy Foundation for this opportunity to share my thoughts and experiences on this topic, breaking the cycle childhood trauma. I extend my special thanks to Caroline Mahfoud, CEO of the Grace Kennedy Foundation, and the team members for the great skills that they demonstrated in organizing this event. Give them a hand. It was a lot of work, but not traumatic. Special thanks to Dr. Charmaine Mackenzie. Where's Charmaine? The editor of the book we have produced. Charmaine, boy, it's been a long journey. Thanks for the long hours and your perseverance, the many corrections to get this book ready. And I encourage everyone, kindly read it. It's online and it's free. This evening, my aim is to spark curiosity, explore ideas, ask questions, encourage meaningful discussions, and we're open to disagreement. We live in a world where many persons who have experienced trauma have been shamed and silenced into secrecy and pain. This evening offers us a unique opportunity to lift this veil of secrecy, silence, and shame. I'm a psychiatrist. And psychiatrists deal with pain and hope. Some people think that otherwise. This evening, some content that we will share may make us uncomfortable. Please remember to take care of self. This may require seeking professional help. And I know many of you are experts in the field, others are new to it or curious about it. I trust my insights resonate with you, provide value, and leave you inspired to explore further. Thank you all. Those in the room and those online, thank you for joining. And there's silence. And I'm going to start with a story. Psychiatrists like to tell story, you know. In fact, they say of us that, well, let me not make the joke now. I'll probably leave it later. But I'll start the story about this 6-year-old young man, a little boy. And at 6, it was one night, he got the news that his mother died suddenly. Poor child, question in his mind, how could this be? Even question God, how could you let this happen to me? And of course, it impacted on him. It was his first year in elementary school, and his teacher brought him closer to her because she realized that he was acting out a little bit, you know. Thanks for that loving care of a teacher. That child happens to be me. And I hear, yes. And I tell you this, it was a traumatic journey. Because in those days, about 60 years ago, now you've worked out my age, right? So about 60, I said about, it's about 60 years ago. Jamaica only had probably, 1 or 2 psychiatrists. We had no psychologists, so there was no talk about therapy and all of those great things. And it was had it not been for extended family, a caring father, and that teacher in my elementary school who is still alive, I would probably not be here today. And so I just want to be grateful for the many persons who've been in my life. And so some of you are saying, I see why you have chosen this topic. Because, you know, they often talk about the wounded healer. And I see a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists here and people who are not in mental health. And everybody's trying to make the diagnosis. Well, as we go along, you probably might have some clarity, right? But, so when I shared with before I get to that, let me address the first question here, what is trauma? Because that's what we're going to be talking about. And trauma occurs when individuals are exposed to events that are distressing, potentially life-threatening, events that can overwhelm our ability to cope. And often these experiences we witness them, we may witness them, we may be involved in them directly or even told about it. And I'll pause on that because we can be traumatized by being told about incidents. And that is why it's important in today's world that, when events occur in communities, we don't drag people together and have them debrief. We don't do debriefing anymore because debriefing actually traumatizes people. And that is why media has to handle sensitive information a little bit more, because very often, a lot of people in fact will tell you they don't watch television in Jamaica or listen to radio because the content is too traumatizing for them. And it's because people become traumatized. They become vicariously traumatized just by listening to conversations and seeing the blood. And if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead in media, right? And that is something we have to pay attention to. But why childhood trauma? I've decided to focus on childhood trauma because children are vulnerable, very vulnerable. And the reality is that not every child who is exposed to trauma will have problems. But the reality also is that trauma may affect their life trajectory from the womb to the tomb. And that is why it's so important for us to have this discussion. Now, I just want to make clarify something here, because in the literature, there are so many words that are used to describe trauma. It actually gets you, it can make you traumatic just reading the literature, right? There's adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, which we'll talk about, childhood adversity, early adversity, trauma, childhood stressors, child maltreatment, childhood harm. So forgive me if you find that I'm jumping using all of these terms this evening. They mean all the same, more or less. So I told a good friend of mine who is in this room, and I said, I'm going to talk about childhood trauma. And she said to me, why childhood trauma? What do you know about childhood trauma? And I thought about it, and as to why I actually chose to do this topic. And I want you to join me on this journey. It started out when I was being trained as a psychiatrist, and at the time I was placed at the Comprehensive Health Center. And I was at that time being mentored by Dr. Pauline Milburn, who is here. Dr. Milburn, could you stand? Because I'm dedicating this lecture to you. But Dr. Milburn, I refer to as a mother of child psychiatry in Jamaica. So she ran this clinic many years at the Comprehensive Health Center and taught many of us, generations of us. And while working with her, I would see children who were irritable, children always fighting, children cutting themselves sometimes, children stealing, lying. And we would make diagnoses like conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, even attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I'm sure that diagnosis is going to be increased very soon, because I noticed the drug that is actually used to treat it, Concerta, is now covered under the National Health Fund. And I notice a lot of my colleagues are here, and sometimes I speak out a term. Please do not overdiagnose this condition when these children come. Just follow the discussion, and somebody is saying, yeah, of course, it's true. Right? So we're seeing these children, and when you look into their history, there were problems in the family, yes. There were social problems. And we would, yes, identify these were contributory, but it wasn't clear because the diagnosis just couldn't fit, I thought this couldn't all be attention deficit disorder, couldn't all be conduct disorder. And then I was placed in St. Ann's Bay to work for a psychiatrist in the Northeast region. And when I was there, I was swamped with a lot of children who were referred from the school system. And it's because I was working closely with a teacher at the time. She was a teacher, special educator, now a psychologist, Dr. Orlean Brown. And I see Orlean here, right? And Orlean, she commented one day, she saw me one day crawling under the barbed wire fence, right, to get to the schoolroom, right? And I was telling her, look here, there are many children we're seeing, and something is happening here. But there were children not learning, children daydreaming in class, children not paying attention, children, again, who were hyperactive, restless in class. And again, the diagnosis that we had was the conduct disorder, the attention deficit disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. Yes, they were having problems at home. There were social problems. And then many years later, I started to work with a hard-working lady, Audrey Budai. Audrey is also here. You know, all my fan club, they're here with me this evening, right? Audrey, thanks for coming. Audrey used, at the time, worked with the Child Development Agency. And that is where I would see children in state care, children who were running away, children who were involved with older adults, children who were being shifted from one family to another. And some of the stories are painful. I see some of those children this evening. I remember one evening I was called out to see a child, and I'm kind of distorting the story so that we can't make any connection. But I was called out to see this particular patient, and when I went, the blood was dripping, red blood dripping on the floor. And it was that she had cut herself. And when I asked, it was that she got news that the person who she lived with was murdered. And they cut her head, tied it in an ackee tree, and 2 fingers were cut and stuck in the mouth. And when you heard this story, this was a young person who was sexually abused by family, stepfather, 3 young men in the family, and sometimes the individual was actually sent out in the community to have sex at a very young age. And these were the stories. I know they're painful and the room is silent, and I'm sorry. And I'm probably dissociating, and I'll tell you what that is. Dissociation is when you get painful stories, you actually you actually leave your body. Yes? That's what happens to people sometimes when they're dissociating. And that is why you may be walking and you happen upon somebody, or you think the person might be there to rob you, right? And you freeze. And what it is sometimes, that freezing is sometimes we dissociate and we just, when we sense danger, we dissociate and we just leave our body behind. Yes? There could be more graphic examples I give, but I won't do it. But I also remember the story of a young man. And I saw him and I said to him, he showed me his toe, he's kicked off his shoes and said, look at this. And when I looked, his toenails were missing. And I said, what happened? And he said that he was in foster care and the foster mother took pliers and pulled out the toenails. Yes, these are the stories. I don't know how Dr. Milburn and others, and Audrey Budai and Orlean, Dr. Brown, continue to work with these clients on a daily basis. You know, and Dr. Milburn, I always admire your calm, how you've been able to just manage under those difficult circumstances. But these are the cases that we see on a daily basis. And of course, as an adult practicing psychiatrist, the many nights you're called out for the persons who have attempted suicide, or persons who suffering from depression, people who use substances, and of course it goes back to their past. And so over the years, the question would be repeated in my head, what's wrong with that child or those children or those adults? Because the textbook weren't giving a clear picture. And this is how the thoughts were in my head. Keep going up and down from night to night until I had my light bulb moment. What's that moment? It was when this study was put out, a study on adverse childhood experiences, ACEs study. At the time it was actually done in 1998, the first large study on ACEs in the USA. They questioned over 17,000 adults, asked questions about early trauma. And the questions that were asked had to do with 10 categories of trauma. In purple, you see here abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, 3. Physical neglect, emotional neglect, 2. And in green are experiences within the household, like domestic violence, loss of a parent, as was my situation, drugs and alcohol use, mental health issues in the household, and household member being incarcerated. And the study, the results were astounding. They found that ACEs are common, that's your adverse childhood experiences. And they found that 2 out of every 3 persons had at least one ACE. 2/3, 2 out of every 3. I was going to ask you to look in front, look behind, look to your left or right, but let me not do that, yes? But it also showed that 1 in 6 persons who answered had reported 4 or more ACEs. But what the study also showed is that these adverse childhood experiences were linked to 5 of the 10 leading causes of death globally. And what is also interesting in terms of the findings from this study is that if you have, the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to die earlier. With 6 or more ACEs, persons actually had premature mortality, meaning that they will die 20 years earlier. So we die, if our trauma is not dealt with, we die early. And what the study also showed is that 4 more ACEs were associated, well, I think I mentioned that, higher rates of stroke, heart disease, diabetes, lung diseases, and many more. And I'm showing this slide on Jamaica. It's a 2021 leading causes of death. Couldn't get a more updated one, so I actually, the one that you're seeing in black is actually the one on COVID, because COVID was actually the 3rd cause of death in 2021. But you see the causes: stroke, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, violence at number 5, and hypertensive heart disease. And the reason I'm actually highlighting this is that you realize the leading causes of death here in Jamaica are similar to what we're seeing globally, and we realize the connection with these conditions and adverse childhood experiences. And we'll come back to that, because obviously we need to be studying more, we need to be looking more at the situation as it is in Jamaica, and recognize that trauma contributes or is linked to many health conditions. What is also interesting in this study is that as the number of ACEs increases, so does the risk for health outcomes. It goes zoop, right? 1 ACE, 2 ACEs, 3 ACEs, 4 ACEs, the risk is increased. And I think I showed you that. So for example, if you have 4 more ACEs, the risk is doubled for stroke, diabetes, heart disease. And with 4 more ACEs, 15 times the risk of committing violence. And I think Mr. Kennedy shared with us the reality in the inner city communities and schools in Jamaica with the high level of exposure that is actually reported by young people. Let's look at the link with mental health problems. If you have 4 more ACEs, it increases the risk of suicide by 12. And we know that because when people present to us in an emergency room and we ask, tell us, what are the factors that may be contributing to your thinking about suicide or attempting and so on, invariably it takes you back to childhood trauma. The risk for alcohol, 7 times, depression 5 times. And of course, ACEs are also linked to post-traumatic stress disorder and conditions such as anxiety. So this study, the 1998 study, at the time when the data was presented, it was groundbreaking. It highlighted the link with health problems, and we realized that we were living in silence, secrecy, and shame, pain. We weren't talking about trauma. But the study changed the narrative. And in changing it, we started to talk more about trauma. People started to research it more. We started to develop our system so that we can better deal with trauma. But of course, like any good study, the ACEs study has several limitations. It didn't account for all causes of trauma, because there were, how many did I mention, if you following me? 10, yes? And you know there are many more causes, and we'll come to that. And not enough was actually done in terms of mental health. And the study, well, it wasn't their intention to establish any causation, because it was a study in which they were looking back in data. It was called a retrospective study. And as I said before, it was focusing on the original 10. Now, today, we have expanded our list of ACEs, and that's why we move away from the adverse childhood experiences, because that study kind of locked us into the 10, right? And that's why I've chosen the topic, childhood trauma, because it reflects that we're looking at a more expanded list of ACEs. And there are many frameworks that we have used. The one I like is that they talk about the 4 realms of ACEs, where they look at the tree, and it would be the adverse community environment. Adverse community environment would be the soil and the roots, like violence in the community and that sort of thing. Adverse climate events would be the storm cloud ahead, and I see our climate envoy here. You know very well, nowadays we're talking about bioclimatic events and climate change and how it affects especially small island developing states. We know the frequency of hurricanes and other disasters that we're being exposed to. And these, in fact, are traumatic, not only for the entire population, but also for children. And of course, adverse cultural experiences, the groundwater, that is there, just underground. We don't see it, we don't talk about it. These would be historical events like enslavement and so on, and I'll come to that in a little bit. Another way you could look at the expanded list of ACEs is those that are individual, family-based, school-based, community, and so on. But I want to go into all of that because some of it will come out in the discussion. But I want to touch on intergenerational or generational trauma. And this refers to the passing down of traumatic stressors or experiences, right, from one offspring to another. So what we're now recognizing is that a grandparent could have been exposed to trauma, and it's passed down to parents and the grandchildren, and they can pass it on to future offspring. And a lot of work has been done in this area. There's also a closely related topic, which is historical trauma, such as war, the pandemic. I don't think we have really fully explored the pandemic. I see you're shaking your head, but let me tell you something. Every day, those of us in mental health and other areas of life have to deal with the pandemic, and the pandemic has been very traumatic for children, yes? And the thing about children is that when they're experiencing trauma, they don't talk. But we must be mindful of that reality. But the war, the pandemic, natural disasters, enslavement, these are collective trauma, traumatic events that affect many persons, and not only many persons at one time, but several generations all at once. We all have been affected by the pandemic. Nobody has been spared, yes? And we hold these traumatic memories in what we call a collective memory, all of us, right? And from day on, day out, every day, we experience the ongoing reconstruction of trauma. And this historical traumatic exposure can be passed on from one generation to another. And I will further build on this as I go through the discussion. But having said all of that, right? What about Jamaica? What about childhood trauma in Jamaica? Unfortunately, we don't have any comprehensive study on ACEs. So we don't have one of those broad-based study looking at all the ACEs as those fancy studies they've done elsewhere. But we've done a number of studies in terms of looking at exposure to isolated ACEs. Much of it, as you would imagine, would be on violence, because this is a major problem in Jamaica and also in substance abuse. And I'm going to take you to this lovely report that came out in 2023, Jamaica Violence Against Children and Youth Survey in 2023. And because it's one of the most recent data we have, I've borrowed a lot from it just to kind of paint a picture of the landscape in Jamaica in terms of trauma and especially violence. What this study shows is that 8 out of 10 youth, because it was a study looking at young people in Jamaica, reported violence in home or community. So, Mr. Kennedy, it's not surprising what you reported to us in terms of the experience at St. George's College. 8 out of 10 young people, report having experienced violence in their home or community. Which would mean then 8 out of 10 youth would have been exposed to at least one ACE, right? Violence being the most common. In terms of sexual trauma, it shows that looking at children in the age group 13 to 14, 1 in 4 females actually reported sexual trauma, 1 in 10 males sexual trauma. Bullying at school, 2 out of 3 children reported bullying. And somebody said, and I was thinking about bullying because when I was growing up, it wasn't a term we used a lot. You'd go home and say, oh, somebody has teased me. And sometimes a parent would say, don't worry, just ignore it, right? But it's a major problem, yes? And it is a major problem in our schools, yes? I remember from a prominent high school, a young man was brought to me. And he was a bright student, did very well in his PEP exam? Yes, passing on extra pressure, right? And it's the entire family, parents and everybody. 20 minutes, thank you. I want to be on time. So so he was doing very well in school, and then they started to tease him at school. And it got to the point where he was starting to act out, and we'll explore why he did. But what happened is that he was brought to me, and I remember saying to the guidance counselor, don't you realize that this young man is being bullied? Nobody picked it up. They didn't realize it was really trauma. Yes? And I say this to say that trauma occurs and sometimes we don't recognize it's trauma. This is an interesting study, physical abuse among university students, which we did some years ago. And almost 2 out of 3 reported physical abuse. But what was interesting is that only 1 out of 4 recognized the experience as abuse. That's how it goes. It's life. In the interest of time, I'm going to just skip some of these. Youth considering attempting suicide, 1 in 10 youth in the age group 10 to 15 had serious consideration, and this is a study we did at university. And what we found was that the risk, one of the major risks, was actually being teased or bullied in school. So parents take it very seriously, bullying, yes? And what we found was a good protective factor was actually having a good relationship with parents. And I want to thank you, many parents who are just there for your children. You don't know how important it is and how protective it is. And I'm going to just skip a few here. I want to touch on this because the reports continue to remind us that 1 in 4 children live in poverty in Jamaica. And I just want to pause to say, most people living in poverty don't abuse their children. But the associated factors, risk factors, factors that are associated with poverty actually increase the risk for abuse, such as a chaotic and high-stressed environment, right? And community factors, which were the disorganized, poor neighborhoods, the garrisons, which our politicians have created, right? And so on. And when we look at these, it's really not an easy road for our children. Having shared this thought, I want you to think about this. If you don't heal from what hurt you, then you will bleed on people who did not cut you. And that explains, that's very profound, but explains the blood in this country. There are people who have not healed, and they're bleeding on all of us every day. And we have to deal with this. Of course, as a society, we have to look at the normative attitude towards violence, the popular culture, the music that encourages violence and abuse, the overexposure in media, and of course, the political culture. But these are frightening statistics as we think about our country, Jamaica, land we love. And of course, I take you back 300 years of collective trauma from enslavement, and some of us may say, oh, we keep going back to that. But associated with slavery was a lot of poverty and suffering and destruction of our families, yes? You think about it. Children were ripped from their mother's breast, right? Meals were taken away from their families. And a lot of these patterns of behavior continue, and we'll get into it in a little while. And of course, sexual abuse of women and children was rampant. This is an interesting book, and a book I recommend to everybody, In Miserable Slavery. I know it's going to sell after this, right? But it speaks of the brutality of slavery, right? And just take note of it. It's available. Right? There's also an interesting article we wrote some time ago looking at the psychological trauma of slavery, the Jamaican case study, and I see Professor Naya here from the reparation group here at the university. You'd be interested in this, right? But it's speaking to the psychological trauma associated with enslavement. Trauma decontextualizing a person looks like personality. In fact, Douglas O'Rain reminded me of the study by Professor Hicklin, which pointed out that 1 in 3 Jamaicans may be diagnosed with personality disorder. Trauma decontextualizing a family looks like family trait. And trauma decontextualizing people looks like culture. Think about that. So, having looked at this data, the reality is that trauma is common in Jamaica. And especially so, there's high level of exposure to our children. Just some years ago, the Gleaner in an editorial pointed out that the abuse of children is a public health issue, and we need to treat it as such. Now, having said that, how does trauma affect the brain, body, or behavior? How does it affect education of children? How? You know, I think it's important for us to explore this. And to understand that we have to appreciate what is called the stress response. And in order to, before I look at that, I'm going to give you a quick anatomy class, right? The brain we have here, yes? This part is the frontal lobe. It's a thinking part. You know, mine is big. That's why they asked me to do the lecture, because they expect me to think and deliver to you, right? Thinking brain. You'll never forget that. And that's a prefrontal cortex. And that's a thinking part of the brain. Let me go back a little bit. And then deep inside the brain, there's a part called the amygdala. It's easy to remember. It's the alarm. A for amygdala. A for alarm. Always struggle to pronounce that word, but it's the alarm system of the brain. And then there's a hippocampus. It's like the filing cabinet. It stores a memory. It stores our memories and emotions and so on. And understanding that will help us to understand how stress works. And so I talk about the stress response. So imagine one night you're walking in the park and you see a pit bull. We all are afraid of pit bull. And the alarm system goes off. That's the amygdala that says, it's a pit bull, dangerous. He's bitten many persons. And it's preparing you to do what? Flight, fight, or you can freeze. Just get out of your body. But the hippocampus comes in and says, but this is not a real trigger, you know. And the prefrontal cortex, which is thinking, what would it say to you? The dog is chained and the owner is nearby, so you're safe, you're quiet. So instead of running, you just sigh and you calm down. And that's the normal stress response that protects us. During that process, of course, the body produces a lot of cortisol, the stress hormone. But what if that pit bull comes home every night into your bedroom? And that's called toxic stress. That's what childhood trauma is about. Prolonged, repeated stress. Day in, day out, night after night, children are exposed to prolonged, repeated stress. And what it does is causes overactivation of their stress response. So the cortisol that is produced becomes poisonous, toxic to the brain and the body. I'll skip some of that. And, you know, they've done images showing what stress does to the brain, and you can see the difference there. I won't go into that. What this is telling us is that our brains are wired for connection. Trauma rewires the brain for protection. And that's why healthy relationships are difficult for wounded people. So, toxic stress, how does it affect early development? Can cause growth delay, problems with attention, learning, memory, low academic performance. Because of the problem with the prefrontal cortex, you have problems controlling your impulses, behavior, emotions. And therefore, I take you back to those children, or this child. These children who are irritable. They're irritable because they're what? Not regulated. The alarm system is constantly off. Yes? The child who won't sit still in class may be hypervigilant, always expecting danger. This child who is not sleeping, hypervigilant, always fighting, has poor impulse control because the prefrontal cortex is actually not working well. The child who is daydreaming, not listening, may actually be dissociating, thinking about trauma, and has just left his body in the classroom. And you know what the teacher would do? Take a strap and just hit the child, yes? The days before corporal punishment was banned, yes? And that would also be what? Further re-traumatizing to the child. So these children, they were not bad. I hate to use the word, nor were they mad, right? They're actually sad children, right? Responding to toxic stress. And so, going forth, let us not ask what is wrong with this child, but what? What has what? Happened to the, I want everybody to repeat that. What has what? Happened to that child. Let's change the discourse. Because behavior is a language of trauma. Children will show you before they tell you they are in distress. Right? That's what we were seeing in the clinic. That's what we're seeing in the classroom. That's what we're seeing in the children in state care. They're seeing their behavior as a result of trauma. Apart from that, we know that toxic stress can lead to self-harming behavior, alcohol, substance abuse, aggression, violence, risky sexual behavior, poor parenting, problem with relationships, and also the propagation of intergenerational trauma. Mental disorders, I've dealt with that. I don't need to go through that. And of course, just to explain quickly the relationship between toxic stress and physical health. Because how is it trauma? How can it contribute to heart disease and other conditions? And it's because of the hormonal changes. I spoke about the cortisol, yes, being produced in excessive amount. The inflammatory changes in the body. And immunological changes in the body, all related to the toxic stress.
Hi everyone, I am Marsha Blagrove, and today I will be sharing about my experiences as a child, having gone through childhood trauma. Now, I grew up in rural Jamaica, St. James, Montego Bay, and very rural. I mean, we had no running water, we had no electricity, no bathroom facilities. So I grew up under impoverished circumstances. I ended up also being abused physically by my mother and verbally, and sexually by my stepfather and persons in my community. What did this do to me? It caused me to be an individual who had no self-esteem, very low self-esteem. I mean, hygienic problems. I suffered with odor issues and not having basic amenities like roll-on and perfume and those things. Now, going to school, this affected me because I was bullied. I was, called the stinky girl and all of that. So it came out in my behavior. I started fighting, quarreling with everybody. I suffered inferiority issues. I was always trying to fit in but not able to because of my situation. Now, I believed I had no one who would have listened or cared for me. But eventually my guidance counselor, who saw potential in me and also saw the trauma that I was going through, assisted. And so she counseled me, she questioned me, and of course a whole can of worm was open because what was happening to me, the abuse, the physical, the sexual abuse, I suppressed it and really didn't want to speak to anybody about it. But what she did was she helped me to open up. And so I was able to get some help. Now, getting help was not very accessible because those times in the 80s, we didn't have the resources that we now have, and the entities like the CDA or the SISOCA branches. What we had was just the police, who I believe they were not fully sensitized of the kind of help that we should have get. However, I was able to reach out to the Women's Crisis Center or the Women Inc. and gotten a few help at that time. Now, how did that impact me as a teenager into adulthood? I'll tell you more about that.
That's a client who decided to just share her story. But how she actually presented to us, yes, Livera, brave. She's breaking the silence. And I'll tell you this, some years ago, we used her at a workshop for guidance counselors. And she told me after the workshop, she was actually surprised. So many guidance counselors came to her crying and said, that was my experience. Wounded healers. It's a lot of trauma in the society. Let me take us to another topic. And the lights are off. You can turn it on. Wasn't intended to scare you, but I want to introduce this topic because it will explain to us how trauma can be passed on from one generation to another. It's about epigenetics, and it explains how genes are turned on and turned off. You'll never forget the night. Turning on, turning off, right? And it's the process by which our genetic message is actually changed. In that process, the sequence of genes not change. And in fact, the way I remember it is, you think about a keyboard. You go on it, the keys, the sequence not change, right? But you can type. I hope the lecture is not too long, but I'm told we have 10 minutes, right? You can change the sequence of words. You can change the genetic message, yes? And that's how epigenetic works, yes? And with what it tells us is that our trauma or experience or environment actually changes the gene expression. It's 3 E's: experience, environment, expression, leading to behaviors and risk behavior, and of course that can be transferred across generation because because what the trauma does is changes the genes. So a child who is exposed to a harsh community, the expression of their genes are actually changed. And it affects your attitude, behavior, cognition, health outcome, right? And this is very complex. I'll skip that one. There's also another one. This one is very interesting because it will tell us how to live longer, right? We have, the chromosomes carry our genes. And there's a telomere, which is like that little, think of the chromosome as a shoelace, yes? And the telomere is that little plastic cap, the protective cap at the end of the chromosome, and it protects it from fraying. It protects the chromosome. And the telomere can actually be shortened by trauma, yes, by aging. So that means we have to prevent our telomeres from what? Shortening, right? So I'll tell you how we can prevent that. And cancer, right? And I'll just throw this to you, and you catch it for me. right? Sorry about that. But it tells you that the telomere can be passed from one person to another. That's a message, yes? And trauma shortens the telomere, yes? And it passes from one generation to another. And so studies have been done to show how trauma is transmitted to offspring. Mothers with ACEs, with trauma, pass their shortened telomeres to their offsprings. And these offsprings actually develop problems, behavioral problems later in life. So it's also the epigenetic effect and the what? Telomeres. Remember that. That shoelace that I threw, right? And this is what explains intergenerational transmission, how epigenetics and telomere shortening actually pass from one. We pass our trauma to our offsprings across generations. But since I promised you tell you about telomere, they're shortened by what? Aging. And so a lot of research is being done now to see how we can prevent that. And people argue things like, well, you know, exercise, proper diet, antioxidants will prevent us from aging. Well, I know you all knew that, so that's not surprising. But you can read up. So let me skip this one. This is really just summarizing what we said, the trauma, toxic stress, how it affects brain development, it's hardwired into our biology, how it affects mental disorders, chronic disease, education, crime, and so on, right? And can be passed down. We bury our trauma and pain. We carry them in our brains and bodies, then pass them to another generation. Now, I'll just quickly tell you about the buffering effect. And you can imagine what is this. It's how do we buffer this toxic stress and prevent it from doing all of this damage to our brain or in our bodies and creating behavioral problems. All the studies that have been done show that positive relationships protect people, children, from toxic stress. Having an adult in your life who is able to provide a stable, secure, and safe relationship is protective. And it's 5 minutes, but you know I'm going to go about 10, yeah? And so we come now to how to break the cycle of trauma, yes? And can we use this knowledge to protect our children? This is the exciting part. How can we do that? We're not doomed. These children are not doomed. There's hope. There's hope. Trauma can be prevented more easily than it can be healed. Those of us who work, yes, know how difficult it is, right, to heal people from trauma. In fact, it's often said that the physical scars may heal, right? But the traumatic scars take a long, long time to heal, if ever at all. But what we know about effective interventions is that they're not quick, they're not cheap, and a lot of times they're long-term and intense. Yes? And there are different types of intervention, there are different levels, and the timing of intervention critical. And I'll tell you, the most effective interventions are those that involve screening, yes? And screening is relatively cheap. We should be screening our population, screening in schools, screening in our healthcare setting for persons with a history of trauma. Home visitation has also been shown to be very effective, positive parenting program, high quality childcare and early education, and of course, multi-component programs. And I'll quickly go through this. In terms of the timing of interventions, there are 3 windows of development in a child's life: 0 to 2, 9 to 4, 19 to 21. As the doctor right here, he likes to talk about the first 1,000 days, the time from conception to end of age 2. Remember, conception is about a year, you know, that's how we get the first 1,000 days. But what the science tells us is that when children get a strong start, they get a what? Good finish, right? And positive relationships, safe, secure, nurturing relationship. If you take away anything tonight, remember SSN. Everybody what? SSN. Safe, secure, nurturing relationships. Positive relationships, provide good foundation. The parent-child relationship is the most powerful mental health intervention known to mankind. And the positive, even studies we've done, lots of studies show that positive relationships are protective. I see Professor Julie Meeks here. They've been involved in a very interesting study, the Jamaican study that was done many years ago. And the lead here was Professor Sally McGregor. And other members of the team are Professor Susan Walker. I think they may all be here. And that became a very popular study. Well, a simple study, you know, which showed that home visitation, this was really done on children who were undernourished, but children who also were exposed to a lot of trauma. I mean, poor nutrition is also traumatic and can lead to toxic stress. And what they did in this study, home visitation, nutritional supplementation, stimulation, just to make to make the point quick. And when they followed up the children 22 years later, they were doing better educationally, they were earning higher, and they were less likely to be involved in crime. Remarkable findings, right? And the famous Jamaican studies, lesson learned, good start, provides a strong foundation, great finish in terms of educational achievement, productivity, responsible citizenship, and long-term health. And this lady reminds us about that. You know, when she gets a good start, it's what? A good what? Finish, right? And that's why these early intervention programs are important. When children get strong start, good finish. And what Professor Meeks reminded me about was that this famous intervention, the Jamaican study, has been replicated in about 16 countries, not in Jamaica. Even in China, you know, they've replicated it, not in Jamaica. And so those of us in the university community encourage us, own what we've done and done very well. Early intervention program works, right? There's also the cultural therapy program, which is another early intervention program that was developed by Professor Hicklin. And I only quoted Dr. Guzda here because she had a paper published on it, right? Let me take you to treatment quickly that in the study that we did in terms of the violence against children, what was interesting is that 50% of the children and youth said that they're not able to access service. And that is surprising, right? And we therefore ask ourselves, are our services becoming a pipeline to prison? We're not providing them, yes? Lack of access and inadequate care. We know that those of us who treat children with trauma, it takes them sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year to get into treatment. Yes? And the challenge is a lot of the people involved in care are not. They're doing their best, and I wouldn't knock them, I don't want to berate them, but a lot of people are not adequately trained to what? Deal with trauma. But they do a good job. And so I take us to one of the solutions moving forward, the whole need for us to develop trauma-informed care. It's a concept that recognizes that trauma is common, it affects people's life, and that we need to engage persons more, and that we shouldn't re-traumatize people. And this, I think, highlights what puts trauma-informed care in perspective. That when we see children and persons, we don't ask them what is wrong. We ask what? What has happened to this child, not what's what wrong with this child, because we now understand that trauma can lead to a lot of problems, right? The 4 components of trauma-informed care, the R's, we must realize impact of trauma, recognize the signs, respond to trauma, and reduce re-traumatization of persons in our systems, right? And I'll skip this one. And so this is a call for us to, institute trauma-informed care, to apply the components and principles of trauma care in all our systems and programs and practices providing care to children in terms of the clinical health services, social services, human services, and schools, so that we become more aware and sensitized. That is why we really should not be, we need to have a law that bans corporal punishment in schools and harsher laws against corporal punishment in homes, because we're re-traumatizing a lot of children who are exposed to trauma. This is a big one. We need to prioritize childhood trauma, right? That childhood trauma abuse is a public health problem, right? And I don't think we fully recognize this. I know the resources are challenged and what we do is focus on chronic diseases, but we should also realize that a lot of the chronic diseases are linked to trauma, right? And so our public health system needs to better orientate itself to recognize that we need a more coordinated and integrated approach to trauma. At a societal level, we need to have a greater respect for human life. I think a major part of the problem in this country is that we do not have respect for human life. Yes? The other day I was driving and I heard somebody just casually say, I'm going to kill you. Right? We say it just easily like that. I'm going to kill you. Because it's how it speaks to the lack of respect for human life. In terms of law and order, the country needs to take a zero tolerance approach, and we have to deal with the popular culture. All aspects of the popular culture. It's aggressive, it's violent. You know, even some of our cultural icons, and I know I'm going to take a hit for this. We teach children some of the dialect, and it's about cursing people. And some of what they're learning is violent, and you send them to the festival and they get gold medal and we clap them. What is it we're teaching them? To develop these dysfunctional behavior, and we have to address these things in the popular culture and take a zero tolerance approach to it, yes? And as I come to a close, I have to add to the call for reparation. It's time to repair the harm, right? And you know, the concept of reparation is about acknowledging, apologizing, and making amends. And the amends is not begging for money, you know. In our chain hands, we're not doing that. All we're asking is that persons who have harmed us, right, over the years, right? And I'm glad the Anglican Church, for example, has extended an apology. But they need to make amends, right, to address the years of suffering and poverty of our people, yes? Time for recommendation. And as I come to an end, I just want to make some quick acknowledgements to the many individuals who are here who work and provide care for persons. Give yourself a round of applause. Service providers, government, NGO, Office of Children's Advocate, funding agencies, or international partners, or tertiary institutions that have given us a place and space to work and to research and add to the discussion. And to parents, friends, and community, thank you for listening. And as I come to an end, I just want to remind us it takes a village to raise a child. Remember, one of the most important things that we can do to protect our children is to provide a safe and healthy relationships and community, right? And for those of us working in care, let's become trauma informed. Please, after this evening, spread the awareness, right? And if you leave with anything, I want you to remember this. This is a quick quiz. And you answer with one word. A child who is irritable, trauma. Fighting, cutting self, daydreaming, not paying attention, hyperactive, restless, stealing line, running away from home. Think trauma. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's all trauma, but think about that, right? And as we end, I just want us all to just consider this message from a little boy. If I were born with all my knowledge at birth, I would have said to my parents something like this: push, don't shove, talk, don't scream, teach, don't lecture, hold me, don't pull me, guide, don't take my place. Lastly, love me without measure. And for those of us who carry our trauma and pain buried in our bodies and brains, covered by silence and shame, when we heal our trauma, we break the pattern for the next generation. That's our work. That's our gift to the next generation. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers. As you just heard, that was the guest lecture by Professor Honorable Wendell Abel. He was speaking about breaking the cycle of childhood trauma. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back. We have some interviews to conduct regarding the lecture. Please stay with us.
Enough power tool, big to small. Jackama figure dig the wall.
Our Total Tools.
Weed whacker figure trim the lawn. We have everything a job demand.
Total Tools.
We rent them, sell them and fix them. Also give Total Tools a call. When I say home improvement, landscape construction, a Total Tools are your option. Home improvement, landscape construction, Total Tools are your option.
Total Tools, located at 102 Main Street, Ocho Rios, 34 Slipe Road, Kingston.
And lot C6 Jacksaw, Sentence Bay. Call us today.
Experience the joy of buying a brand new Hyundai without breaking the bank. Yes, buying a brand new car should never leave you broke. From stylish designs and safety features to comfortable driving and reliability, Hyundai is the choice. Hyundai vehicles come standard with 2 years free service and 5 years warranty and roadside assistance for your peace of mind. Drive 2 years without service cost and 5 years without fear of being stranded. Hyundai. Conditions apply.
Taboo topics. Voyagings after dark.
Riveting discussions.
Celebrity news and interviews.
Topics that are shunned by society.
And everything else in between. Voyagings After Dark with Kareem Voyagings. Each and every Wednesday, 8 to 11 p.m. Voyagings After Dark. No topic is too taboo or hard to discuss. Come get your mind blown and your curiosity explored. Voyagings After Dark.
As a parent, you give your children a good start in life. You nurture, protect, and guide them. Parenting is a process that prepares your child for independence. As your child grows and develops, there are many things you can do to help your child. Stay tuned to The Big Show, nationwide this morning, for parenting tips. Fridays at 6:53 a.m. Only here will you learn everything you need to know about parenting. Tips to help parents navigate the incredibly challenging and rewarding journey of child rearing. Parenting tips on Nationwide at 90 FM, the revolution in media.
It's Monday. Get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The E-Zone is here for you. With the Stinger Honeybee.
And Kareem Boyatings
From 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezoneblindates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblindates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Welcome back, listeners and viewers. We are coming to you from the University of the West Indies Regional Headquarters, just across from UWI Mona campus, where we've just concluded the 35th Annual Grace Kennedy Lecture. This one was on childhood trauma, breaking the cycle. We have with us, of course, though, Dr. Fred Kennedy. He's the chairman of the Grace Kennedy Foundation. Good evening, Dr. Kennedy.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
And I am as well. It was a very excellent lecture discussing the dangers of childhood trauma and how it impacts society and the individual, as well as the economy and pretty much every aspect of Jamaican culture.
Absolutely.
And I just want to talk to you, what was the reason behind this year's topic? Why did Grace Kennedy Foundation choose breaking the cycle of childhood trauma as the 35th lecture?
Well, we've been trying to curtail a lot of the topics of the lectures to the kinds of focuses and work that we do with the foundation. And one of our focuses is health. And we've had a lot of seminars that have been offered to the university students that deal with mental and physical health. we have set up food banks on the campuses that serve over 300 students a month now. And hunger is a huge problem. And even as Dr. Abel pointed out, hunger can, in fact, be can add to trauma and dysfunction in individuals. So that was part of it. And I guess the realization that we had came out of a pandemic, and I think globally people realized that had a huge influence on behaviors and how people were acting. So, and I guess the general understanding in Jamaica that we really do live in a culture of violence, and
Yes.
Dr. Abel really what I found really insidious is the idea that a lot of people don't even understand that they are suffering from any kind of trauma, and they pass it on unwittingly to others. So we've been trying to, as I said, relate a lot of the lectures that we offer to the kinds of activities that we. In the past, we had. Professor Mona Weber talk about the Clean Kingston Harbour, and that gave birth to a huge project where we went into partnership with the Dutch NGO, Ocean Cleanup, that have spent millions of US dollars now so far in cleaning up Kingston Harbour. As I said in my introductory remarks, I think I hope the figure is right, but we've extracted something like 3,000 metric tons of garbage from there. So that was born from dialogue. That was born from a lecture. That was born from Professor Mona Weber and Dale Weber talking about a clean Kingston Harbour, whether it's a pot of gold or a pipe dream.
And that's definitely important because this is the 35th annual lecture, meaning
exactly.
you've kept this going for 35
Exactly.
years. So it's not just the lecture itself, but
Right.
the public information and the expectation that it will be taken further.
Exactly.
And what do you expect to do in terms of the dialogue expansion after having that lecture now, in terms of moving that forward into something that could be implemented to better Jamaican society?
Well, as I said, the environment was a clear case of what happened there. That lecture gave birth to a whole project that we embarked on, and an appeal to get international funding. In the past too, a lot of these we invite a lot of sixth form students as well and their teachers, and a lot of this dialogue goes on beyond these walls. That they go into the classrooms and become part of the discussions. You know, I was reflecting too when I was talking that gathering the intelligentsia of a country is a very special thing. Is getting making people available, accessible to where the expertise lies, and the idea too that Jamaica is a free democratic society, and we're not afraid to disagree with one another. The radio and television are perfect examples of that. And I've heard foreigners come here and say, you know, this could not have been said or done in my country. That people feel, Jamaicans still feel free to express their opinions. And the public lectures are really a function of that. They're an expression of free speech and the promotion of dialogue.
And outside of the public lectures, you hold those annually, but certainly Grace Kennedy Foundation, being a foundation, it has many avenues of outreach. Could you give us some examples?
Sure. Well, in terms of education, a lot of our funds go in. We're fully endowed foundation by Grace Kennedy, and we spend probably close to $80 million a year. Funding, we fund scholarships, tertiary scholarships. We have 90 tertiary scholarships a year. We also have, as I mentioned, the food banks on the campuses. And the third, of course, is the environment. The environment project was so huge and expensive that we really did not have the local funds to fund that cleanup project. So what we did was we applied for international funding, and given the good name of Grace Kennedy, they were able to put faith in us as facilitators of their project, and it's been going amazingly well.
Okay, and just one final thing.
Yes, sir.
This year you spoke about childhood trauma. Last year you said you spoke about the environment.
Yes.
So what goes into the decision for a specific public lecture topic each year? What is maybe the local Jamaican picture? What makes that decision?
Well, we have. How do you mean from internally? You mean or
yes, when Grace Kennedy chooses a lecture topic,
a lecture
what informs
topic
that decision?
Well, it comes internally. I mean, from within our education committee, they explore a number of topics that they think would be of interest to the general public, and then they present that to our board, and then we choose. And we're using the criteria now really in terms of trying to match the topics of the lectures to the kind of work that we are doing. And Professor Abel, I think, has given us some real insight into understanding the importance of mental health. And maybe that's something that we can look at in terms with our health focus now on campuses, that it is more than physical hunger and food insecurity.
Yes.
It has to do with people's abilities to cope and to be successful, and some of the causes of that are traumas. So.
Yes, I like one of the quotes used by Professor Abel. I think it goes something like, "Unless you heal that wound that is bleeding, you're going to bleed on others."
Yes.
That was very profound, as
Yeah.
it just shows you that, yes, the trauma not only impacts you, but it impacts those around you. And the importance of addressing those mental health issues is not just a boon to the individual, but a boon to the country.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Dr.
You're welcome,
Kennedy.
man.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah,
You're
thank
the
you.
chairman of the Grace Kennedy Foundation, and we really appreciate this guest lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Alan Campbell.
I'm Floyd Green.
And I'm Garth Williams. Catch us on the Jamaican Dads podcast right here on Nationwide 90 FM, Thursdays at 8 p.m. with a repeat on Sundays at 6 p.m.
The Jamaican Dads podcast is all about providing men with a healthy, safe, and functional forum to tackle many of the taboo topics that concern our masculinity.
Like everyone else out there, we're dads of varying amounts of experience who come from different backgrounds and often view the world differently.
We're definitely not perfect, but we're all brethren and we're all committed to this piece of rock called Jamaica.
Too often, there are no safe spaces for men to explore the issues which are important to us.
Plus, most of the content out there about parenthood is produced by women, for women. So we think it is important that we be the change we want to see.
Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Jamaican Dads with a Z.
And definitely join us here on Nationwide 90 FM every Thursday at 8 p.m. with a repeat on Sundays at 6 p.m. for the Jamaican Dads podcast. It's a revolution in media.
Taboo topics. Voyagings after dark.
Riveting discussions.
Celebrity news and interviews.
Topics that are shunned by society.
And everything else in between. Voyagings After Dark with Kareem Voyagings each and every Wednesday, 8 to 11 p.m. Voyagings After Dark. No topic is too taboo or hard to discuss. Come get your mind blown and your curiosity explored. Voyagings After Dark.
Cliff says, is by far the most popular mid-morning radio segment in Jamaica. Cliff Hughes shares his views on the hot-button topics of the day, editorializing on various issues in the news, breaking news stories, and expounding on stories. Cliff Says sets the tone of the show for the rest of the day. Join the award-winning journalist Cliff Hughes weekdays during Cliff Hughes Online at 10 to 10:30 a.m. Join the revolution in media.
Cliff Says is brought to you by Educom Credit Union, providing value through service, and Hyundai, modern premium affordable vehicles.
Nationwide 90 FM wants to help you find your home sweet home with all things real estate. A 15-minute program during Nationwide This Morning every Wednesday at 8:35 a.m. All Things Real Estate gives you expert advice on how to navigate the process of owning any real estate, from residential and commercial to industrial or even vacant real estate. We'll guide you through every square foot of information. Now, let's turn that for sale into sold with All Things Real Estate every Wednesday at 8:35 a.m. on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media.
All Things Real Estate is brought to you by Law Boss Attorneys at Law.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to Nationwide News. As you heard, we just had the concluded 35th annual public lecture for the Grace Kennedy Foundation touching on breaking the cycle of childhood trauma. One of the attendants of this lecture is the General Counsel for GK Limited. She is Gail Moss Solomon. Good evening, Ms. Solomon.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you. So you were able to listen to the full lecture. What do you make of the topic itself and the delivery by Professor Wendell Abel?
Well, thanks for that. And just before I answer you, I just have to say that as I was walking over here to discuss with you, I had 2 messages on my phone from people saying, what an amazing lecture, and we're hearing it on Nationwide. So thank you so much for Nationwide for this coverage. Dr. Abel is a phenomenal individual, and he's also excellent at presentations, and he's also very funny. So he's just the perfect person. Full of so much information, and really gave us a lot of data, because he's a data-driven individual, and he asked us to follow the data, follow the science, and he talked about international studies, and he brought it home to Jamaica, and really was able to show us that so many of the issues that we're facing as a nation are really stemming from childhood trauma, which has gone unrecognized and untreated. And I think that the key takeaway from the discussion today was that, as you are, please shine a light on this issue so that people can get help, there can be awareness, we can have increased training, we can have increased discussions like these so that people are aware, and particularly from that early childhood intervention level all the way through adolescence until people are young adults. It's so important to have these conversations.
Yes, I mean, I had a word with Dr. Kennedy, the chairman of the foundation, not too long ago, and speaking about the work that this charitable foundation does, and speaking with you at Grace Kennedy Limited, and how important it is for that foundation's work in terms of the operations of Grace Kennedy.
What a great question. So, you know, the tagline at Grace Kennedy is "We Care." And it's such a multifaceted statement, and it really does speak to our ethos and who we are. So not only do we care about the good food that we produce and the financial services offerings that we produce at the highest level, we also care about the communities that we operate in. And so a part of that caring is really supporting initiatives like this lecture, where we're sharing information and we're bringing awareness and we're really seeking to create stronger communities. So, I mean, that really is the essence and the ethos of what we do at Grace Kennedy. And I tell a story all the time. I've been at Grace Kennedy 9 years. And it's a place I used to look at from the outside and say, wow, what a great company. It looks so great. I wonder, you know, it's award-winning. They do great things. They're so family-oriented, high quality. I wonder what it's like on the inside. And I have to say that 9 years later, what you see from the outside is really what you experience from within.
And there is an importance there as well, because this matter of addressing childhood trauma and mental health more in general, it's not only just benevolent, it also benefits Grace Kennedy, if I'm correct, because these are still not only your customers, but they're also your workers, your employees, etc.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is a community. So community is all of our stakeholders. So it has to start, charity starts at home. So it has to start with the team. And even in the lead up to this lecture and the introduction, reference was made to what we do for our team members. And mental health awareness and support is something that runs through the organization. So we have a lot of information that is shared in this area, whether it's lunch and learns or other initiatives. But also we recognize that trauma is not uncommon. And so there are individuals in their everyday lives that will have experiences that will require them to require support and professional support. And so it's something that we offer to our team members free of cost and their families. We do offer counseling, and we also offer counseling to our communities. We have 2 counselors on staff. We have 2 foundations. Yes. We have the Grace Kennedy Foundation and we have the Grace and Staff Community Development Foundation, and we have 2 counselors at that foundation who are providing support to the community throughout the year, 24/7, and really do excellent work there. So we are focused on our team members, but also the wider community.
Okay, and if you don't mind me asking, just could you give me a more broader overview of how Grace Kennedy Limited supports these foundations, probably not just in monetary value, but how you ensure that their work is of meaning and is able to better impact the society of Jamaica?
That's a great question too. So it's really embedded in the way that we do things. So one of our foundations, the Grace and Staff Community Development Foundation, is in fact I think the only one of its kind that I know of that is structured in this way. And you asked about how it's a part of the company and what we do. That foundation, yes, it's Grace Kennedy, the company, that funds it. But half of that funding comes from the team. So once you're an employee of Grace Kennedy, you are asked, it's not compulsory, but most do, you are asked to make a contribution to that foundation as an employee. So we actually fuel the foundation. And then the company matches those contributions 2 to 1. So that is an incredible way that we are able to really make it a part of what we do. And then of course we're constantly involving the work of the foundations in the work of the organization and building that awareness. So constantly when we have forums, the foundation heads, the 2 CEOs, Sandrina Davis and Caroline Mahfood, who you spoke to earlier, are coming to talk about the work that we do and partnering with the businesses and the employees to carry out that work. So if we're doing something at the universities, for example, then we have our team members from First Global Bank or GK Capital or the Foods Division coming and working with the foundation and campus to do whatever it is that they're doing. So we make it very much a part of our everyday lives.
And focusing on this specific lecture, because I was told last year that Grace Kennedy actually assisted further after that lecture on the environment to launch some projects relating to the Kingston Harbour.
Absolutely.
So I assume Grace Kennedy's relation with this topic of breaking the cycle of childhood trauma does not end here at just this lecture as well.
It absolutely will not. Professor Abel has come and shared really insightful information with us, and I think that Grace Kennedy will now take this as a charge to see what more can we do in terms of really reversing the damaging effects that he described that this issue is having on young people and the wider society, and what role Grace Kennedy and other corporates can play in reversing that cycle.
Thank you. Gail Moss Solomon, she is the counsel for Grace Kennedy. Thank you so much. Well, listeners and viewers, we thank you for joining us for this 35th public lecture held by the Grace Kennedy Foundation. Once again, that was on breaking the cycle of childhood trauma. I hope you found it informative. Thank you to our super producer this evening, that is Sonia Stewart, who guided us, as long as with our technical operators Compass out here, as well as, I believe it is still Andrew the Glenn Boogs Anderson back in studio. And thanks to Jamal Tucker, who was our cameraman for the evening, as well as everyone in the news and production department led by the capable Cara Paul. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Since 1995, we've been your go-to source for everything related to billiards, amusement machines, and electronics, with locations